Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com.
How long was Neil Armstrong actually on the moon? When did Europe start speaking English? Did Marco Polo really go to China? CuriosityStream is the streaming service for all things history, plus science, wildlife, and more. What's the real story behind the Mona Lisa? We've got that. What caused the collapse of Rome? We know. Where did we find mankind's earliest ancestor? Come find out. For the holidays, give the gift of curiosity with 25% off gift cards for your curious cohorts. It's holiday shopping season at curiositystream.com/gift.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to Movie Film. I am Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
Hey, I'm recovering from the 4th of July.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, much strawberry shortcake was had over here.
Many fireworks were shot off in my neighborhood.
Yeah, same. And we have this really cool thing where we can go on the roof and see sort of the horizon, so we can see several cities' firework displays at once, which is really awesome. But what's crazy is people continue the party until like 2 a.m., and then you're just hearing, through midnight, 1, 2, you hear like, boom, just like over and over. And then actually it was funny because I had fallen asleep and then I woke up and heard something, and I just out of habit kind of opened my phone. And on Facebook, I saw some guy who lives like a couple blocks from me be like, is anyone else hearing this? Like also posting it at 2 a.m. I was like, yeah, I don't know. It's funny. Every neighborhood has those people.
I was, this is the first 4th of July I've had a cat, and he was bouncing up and down every time you could hear a firecracker go off in the distance. I'm like, this cat must be like, what is going on in this neighborhood?
Yeah. So, I mean, sort of like as if, cause I've never had a cat, but like, is it almost like as if you were to go behind it and clap and it has like what is that? Like a jump or something? You
wouldn't be thrilled. I mean, I feel like it's like in those cartoons where like a loud noise goes off and Sylvester is like clinging to the ceiling,
No.
That's basically.
I know. I know that with dogs too. You see that a lot. People posting like, please. Like, this is frightening my dog.
Seriously, this is the first 4th of July since my kids have gotten a little older, where they watch movies and things, where we didn't do our Independence Day rewatch.
I actually thought of you yesterday because I hadn't turned my TV on all day, and then I thought like, I wonder if Independence Day is on, and it made me think of you. So, why is that?
I think it's just we're reaching they're getting too old for the annual rewatch stuff.
Okay, kind of have their own sort of agendas.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, well, to everything a season.
Yeah, but that was a nice time that you'll always remember. And it might be one of those things in a couple years where it's like, remember when we used to do this, and then you guys all get back on the couch.
I think that's Dean Devlin now, as he's reminiscing on when Independence Day was a success that was not overshadowed or at least had a shadow of this really unpleasant sequel.
Yeah. I was just rereading about that. I think because Will Smith might have commented on it or something, or why he chose Suicide Squad instead, or. But I mean, that movie took a real hit for
Vivica A. Fox, who was in the second one, was like, "Yeah, we should have had Will Smith in it."
Yeah,
maybe she would have been in it for more than like a minute and a half.
Right. Yeah, man. Honestly, that movie has been almost entirely erased from my brain.
It really it's fascinating to think about the alternate universe where Will Smith was in the sequel, which I have to imagine would have been a substantially better movie.
I would think so. I mean, just his energy, that character. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Because that is something we've talked about, where the first film was really a zeitgeist defining moment, and then the second one was just kind of a wet fart of a thing that just came and went, and nobody remembers it.
And so much so of a zeitgeisty thing, as you say. I've been revisiting a lot of Indiana Jones sorts of things this past week, and apparently, the whole alien concept of the fourth movie, Spielberg, at the time when they were developing it in the late 90s, was hesitant to do aliens, partially because of Independence Day, feeling like, wow, they trod that really well. And of course he has his own history with it, but it's like, that just happened, and like, do we want to like try to do something just after that? So it loomed large.
I wonder if Spielberg partly said that just as a way to,
yes,
because Lucas was so bound and determined to have aliens, and Spielberg said, but Independence Day, look, they just did it. Oh,
geez, George,
darn it! Boy. I'm so sorry, George. They beat you to it,
And he's just like, George is like, I can wait.
Well, you have been revisiting the Indiana Jones movies, I guess. I mean, tell me about that, because Crystal Skull is, I would assume, the one you. It's not at the tip of your tongue the way the other ones are.
No, so I had some time the night before we were set to watch it. The group that I was going with this time, and I was like, I know the other.
You were going to go for your second viewing of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny,
and so the night before, I was like, let's watch Crystal Skull again. Let's see what came right before this, because I've seen it. I could probably count on one hand how many times I've seen it, maybe even a couple fingers all the way through. And I think we've spoken at length about what that experience was like for us, and I'm noticing too in the reviews and people's reactions to Dial of Destiny. I mean, it just comes up as this sort of, well, yeah, I know, like, no one liked the last one, so is this one better? Like, that seems to be one of the main two, focal points of your opinion on the new one. Well, obviously the last one was terrible. Is this one better? Mm. And so that's kind of my memory of it. And so I just wanted to, I don't know, just to check it out again, because I remember it, but it's, like you said, it's not at the tip of my tongue. And so I queued it up on Disney Plus, and I texted you about like a quarter of the way through and was like, did they do something to this movie? Because it looks so different than what I remembered. And it turns out, I Googled it, and when they did the 4K upgrade or whatever, they recolored the movie. And I was looking, I was like, am I crazy? Because this really, really feels different. And so then I looked, and there's YouTube comparison videos of the original version and the new color palette of what it currently is. And it's amazing. I mean, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the film, but like, it really did make it go down a little bit easier. I remember the first time it feeling, that was a main talking point for us, where before they started shooting it, they said, hey, we watched all the other three. We're going in to make it feel like this movie could have been made right after the last one. And we watched it, and we're like, what? Because it looked so overlit. It was weirdly saturated. It just felt not great. It felt like a movie that was made for ABC on a Thursday night or so. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't feel like an Indiana Jones film. And I couldn't believe the psychological difference it made, seeing the colors feel more correct, way less saturated, a little more earthy tones, kind of a thing. And you've seen it too, right? Like, you've noticed the changes.
Yes, although I wasn't cognizant of there having been a change per se until you mentioned to me that there was actually a color correction. Like, I was like, oh, maybe in 4K. It just looks different. You know what I mean? I didn't realize that they did like a matrix on it, so to speak, where they color corrected the first movie to look like the sequels,
Exactly. But so anyway, I just had to point that out.
At least they didn't do the reverse.
And do the, yes. Can you imagine?
They didn't Kaminsky up the previous three,
Absolutely. Well, and then you've got to imagine Spielberg had his whole E.T., that walkie-talkie situation where he's like, "Oh, I know, I'm not touching him. I'm not touching him." But the movie as a whole, I would say, my feelings, I still think it's easily the weakest of the, well, I was gonna say 4 of the 5. But I think, as we always say, usually about Batman films, I found it went down a lot easier this time when it wasn't the final statement on Indiana Jones, and now it just is one of the weakest chapters in the series. Mm-hmm. So I watch it with a little less of my arms crossed, and we've always said, I mean, the first half of the movie is like, it's pretty darn good. It ramps up well. The mystery is interesting, but it's just, for me at least, it's when they arrive at that Russian camp and, Marion's there, and it just turns into this sort of, I don't know, like they dial up the like yuck humor, and it turns into this sort of like cheesy family comedy, and it just, something about the tone of the last half. And even though like the some of the adventure is fun, but it's just like it doesn't help that the characters aren't super lovable or memorable. Like Mac, we complained about a lot, which it's like, am I supposed to like this person or not? And there's that whole funny thing that you always point out to me at the end, where basically he's going to get sucked. This character Mac is going to get sucked into another dimension and looks at Indy and winks. And it's like, hey, don't worry, I'll be all right. And we're like, I don't care. Like, I don't know you. I don't like you. Like maybe good riddance, like,
bye.
yeah. It's like, he's such a weird miscalculation. So that stuff didn't change. But yeah, I did find there's something kind of fun about watching an indie film I don't know as well. And you reappreciate some things like, oh yeah, that motorcycle chase was really cool. And even the jungle thing, I'm like, there's something here. And I don't like where it ended up necessarily. And a lot of that has to do with CGI business. And of course, the monkeys and all that. But like, I'm like, there's something here. I can see it. But, I'm just comfortable with it not being my favorite. And so that was kind of my experience revisiting it again.
That's, I've said this before. I mean, my kids watched all of these movies, one after the other. And so for them, it's just part of their experience of this franchise. And they laugh at, Indy saying, hey, call the snake a rope. And they laugh at Mutt getting hit in the balls with the plants and stuff in the jungle. And so, they're like on board with it. Right. So it is one of those things where you just say, look, it's not my favorite, but it's one of them. And in a rewatch, it'll get watched. And as you said earlier, it is nice that, well, there's one more stop on the road before we come to a complete halt,
Yeah. I think that really helps. And you had mentioned, we were texting and you were talking about your kids enjoying it, and I'm like, man, well, that makes me happy. And on Facebook, I'm there's this like Indiana Jones group I like follow, and like seeing how many people were at this new one, Dial of Destiny, and they're like 18 years old, and they're like, yeah, my first movie in a theater was Crystal Skull.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, that's great. Like, well, that makes me happy, because then that brings them into the world,
There is one thing that jumped out at me on this rewatch that kind of bugged me, and I'm surprised it never bothered me before, but it's the famous or infamous Shia LaBeouf swinging through the vines scene, right?
Yeah.
So in the context of how that happens is that as they are driving through, you got Indy and Marion and Mutt, and they're in their Jeep, and then he gets pulled up by these vines, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And he's hung up, right?
Yep.
And then he's kind of hung up, and he's like, oh crap, and he starts swinging through the vines. But what bugged me, and again, I'd never noticed it before, I'm like, why would Indy and Marion keep driving?
Why would they leave him?
Like, why would they assume he will somehow Tarzan swing his way out of that circumstance?
That is a great point. I mean, in my head, I don't remember, but I'm like, did it happen? Like he was at the back of the Jeep and they didn't see it, or
they
something?
Know he's not there.
Yeah,
it's.
Yeah, how could they not notice him? Dropping his snarky comments while combing his hair.
Combing his hair.
They're getting away, Daddy-o.
But we'll have more to say about Indiana Jones and the the Shia LaBeouf of it all, or lack thereof.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, yeah, then I'll say just two other things I watched. I'll do this one quick because I don't have a ton to say about it. But, I'm always looking for like a show kind of at the end of the day, something, easy to go down with. And I gave the show Platonic a shot on Apple TV Plus. I always forget. Is that what it's called? Apple TV Plus. Yeah. And it's, I knew it was starring Seth Rogen, Rose Byrne, and I enjoyed them in Neighbors. And who's the guy who directed that? I can't remember. But it's the same guy who did that. And so I was like, well, the pedigree's good. And it's interesting that they're doing like a 30-minute show. And I have to say, it's exactly what I thought it would be. Like, it's kind of low stakes, but it's just like a fun 30-minute hangout show. And the premise is basically Seth Rogen's character has just gotten divorced and he's, early 40s. And he reconnects with a college friend of his, Rose Byrne, and they haven't really been friends since college, but she's married, has kids, a whole different sort of lifestyle than him. And it's, can they still be friends at this different phase of their lives? And, what does that mean? Like, how does her husband feel about it? And, like she's got kids to take care of, but hanging out with him means staying out kind of late. And so it's just that sort of fun and, them finding their way together and seeing if they still can have this friendship all these years later, and her just trying to figure out how she can still be responsible for the things in her life these days while being friends with someone who doesn't have the same ties. And, it's one of those things where it's like a new one will post each week and you go, oh, cool, nice. And then you watch like another 30-minute installment. And so it's been going down easy. It's been fun. So
you've got me intrigued. I'm definitely that sounds like something I'm exactly in the mood for.
Yeah. It's that brand of comedy, just them kind of riffing with one another and sort of put into a situation and then them reacting to it. So, I'll be really curious what you think if you watch it. And then finally, Federica and I were able to check out Asteroid City, the latest Wes Anderson movie. And have you seen this? I know you
take me down to the asteroid city where the grass is green. That's the theme music. Man,
right? Now I'm realizing what a missed opportunity they they passed by. They could have had like Fall Out Boy cover it or something, for the soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, that's really funny. But yeah, no, you're a Wes Anderson fan, right? Like,
I would say not as much of a fan as you, but I definitely appreciate the majority of his films. Yeah.
Yeah, you check in on his work, and yeah.
Like this one I want to see. I haven't had a chance to yet, but I would like to catch it at some point.
Yeah, I would say,
or maybe not, depending on where you landed.
Well, this was an interesting one because I've been a fan since day one. Literally when Bottle Rocket came out in the middle 90s, I saw it that year and was like, who is this guy? I'll follow this guy anywhere. And then it was really exciting then when it was like Rushmore and Tenenbaums and Life Aquatic. I was like, this guy, man, I really like picked the right horse. Like, I love this guy, and have been, following him through the years. But it's funny. I would say this movie is stunning. It looks absolutely beautiful, and it's probably his most inaccessible film to date. And I say that as a fan. Even with the French Dispatch, I didn't find myself passionate about it, but there were things I liked about it. And in this one, I was a little sad to, about halfway through, I was like, oh, I'm not connecting with this. Like, I kind of don't know what we're doing. And, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful film, and it's kind of a complicated movie, honestly. Like, there's parallel stories going on. This isn't really a spoiler to say, but the movie starts with a narrator, Bryan Cranston. Visually we see him, and he's explaining the story of a playwright played by Edward Norton writing this play and casting the play and going through these different things in his life. And this is in black and white. And then what we've seen in the trailer, all the color stuff with Scarlett Johansson, Tom Hanks, that's the play. So you're kind of, I've heard people say this, and I kind of agree. I think a second viewing would probably be rewarding, because then you might be more aware to apply what is happening in the black and white, quote unquote, real life thing to the play that you're watching. But all that said, it suffered from that thing that I'm feeling in more and more late Wes Anderson movies, where a lot of the characters are starting to feel more like dolls that he's just kind of shuffling around these really beautiful dioramas. And I didn't think that was always the case. I mean, like Bottle Rocket, I still to this day really, really love. I think it's a great character film. Rushmore, I think, is maybe one of his best character films, honestly. And I as I was walking out of the theater, I was thinking, if I had watched Bottle Rocket, and it's the only film I knew, and then went straight to this movie, I'd be like, whoa, like, how in the world did we get here? But it's been this natural progression. And I applaud him for having this singular style. I mean, there's no one like him. He is one of the few filmmakers you can just look at a frame and go, oh, I know what that is. But I kind of missed like the human connection. I just didn't feel it as much. And I still, Grand Budapest was probably the last movie of his that I out and out loved. And I felt like that did have, characters that had highs and lows and anxiety and comedy. And I just, I had wished for more of that with this one. But I will, unlike French Dispatch, I was like, I'll probably revisit this and just sort of see how my, opinion solidifies with it, but I never did. And this one I could actually see watching again and just taking it in one more time and just sort of seeing how it plays. But I stand by that. I feel like a lot of people will probably struggle with this. And I did.
I got to be honest. This is 2 Wes Anderson movies in a row that you've blown a kind of cold on.
Yeah.
Kind of surprising.
But I remain like awed by his visuals, and there's certainly, there's fun comedy to be had. Jeffrey Wright cracked me up in every scene he was in as this general. And so, so as a fan of his, I mean, I'm there every movie. I'm there first day. Like I'm just in. But yeah, I'm just hoping that we can keep having this crazy, quirky, stylized style that he's doing as of late. I mean, the really, really stylized style. But just I hope I can find a way into one of the movies again as he keeps going ahead.
So for you, Wes Anderson, it's like M. Night Shyamalan with you, where you're like, no matter what, I'll give it a chance.
Yep, and that's amazing. Yeah, it's just like, wow, he knows me well. But yes, like they've earned a lifetime pass from me, because no matter what they do, even if I don't like it or connect with it, I would say in this case, because it's not that I didn't like it, I just didn't connect with it. But I'm forever riveted. I'm forever riveted by them. So yeah, I'll always check it out and keep hoping.
Wes Anderson directing an M. Night Shyamalan script.
Oh man, I mean,
what does that look like? What Saturday Night Live sketch does that look like?
I know. Actually, I feel like they did something where they did do a horror movie, didn't they? Where Edward Norton. You're right. So I wonder if it would be somewhere along. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, if you watch it, I cannot wait to talk about it with you.
I will attempt to give it a look.
Yeah.
Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
How about
A
yourself?
couple things I've seen. Well,
Yeah.
as it happens, Brian, I got to watch. I dipped back. I dipped back into the archives. My kids are home from school for the summer, so we're kind of going through the stuff in my voodoo, and I decided to put on A Time to Kill.
Wow. Okay. Blast from the past.
It's a throwback, right?
Yeah.
This was released in 1996. It was during that time when every movie was either a John Grisham wannabe or a Tom Clancy wannabe or an actual adaptation of either of their works, right?
It's funny you say that because my memory of this was reading, like The Firm was a really big movie with Tom Cruise. And so it made me read the book. And I was 13. And that was kind of getting me into like reading my own choices. You know what I mean? Not just what school was having me read. And so then I got really into John Grisham. So I remember going back because A Time to Kill was his first book. So hearing you talk about it just takes me back to being like a early teen and reading all those books.
It's funny because, I mean, there was a time when A Time to Kill, one might say. There was a time where this was your summer blockbuster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's like this legal thriller. You have all these stars, and you know, now this would be a Netflix movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. And you watch it. I think it's very good. John Grisham himself said with regards to A Time to Kill, it's good but not great, referring to the movie.
Okay.
And I would agree with that. Like, I think it's very good. It's not, you're not like, oh, I can't wait to rewatch that, but you're like, I'm glad I watched it. You know, it pulls you in.
Right.
Great cast. You know, Sandra Bullock, Kevin Spacey, Ashley Judd. And I mean, just the supporting actors, Kiefer Sutherland, Donald Sutherland. I mean, it's a very, very impressive cast. And you talk about just lightning in a bottle. Matthew McConaughey, who, I mean, he had been in stuff before. You know, he was in whatchamacallit?
Dazed and Confused.
Thank you. Yeah, Dazed and Confused. But like, you can't watch Dazed and Confused and be like, "Oh, this guy is going to be one of the great dramatic actors."
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And Joel Schumacher, who directed A Time to Kill, he put McConaughey front and center, and he is tremendous. I mean, you realize, I mean, do you remember all the hype in 1996 surrounding Matthew McConaughey?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was like, this guy is a big deal, and you watch it, you're like, yeah, it's plain to see. It's a star-making performance. I mean, he is phenomenal.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't seen this since then. So I'm just remembering the moment more than I am the film itself.
Yeah. Oh, and of course, you know, Samuel L. Jackson is like the central character. Charles S. Dutton. I mean, it's like this really impressive cast, you know?
Yeah.
And it, you know, it comes out in summer of 96. It cost $40 million. It made, you know, 160 or something worldwide. And it's a massive success.
Wow. Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know. I miss that era where a movie like this could do well, you know?
Same. Yeah. Like A Few Good Men, you know, or the Pelican Brief, like all those. So yeah. Clear and Present Danger, all those films.
Yeah, like we said, you know, the Tom Clancy adaptations, the John Grisham adaptations, and the wannabe Tom Clancy and wannabe John Grisham adaptations. That right there comprised about 85% of cinematic output from 1991 to 1999.
It really did. I mean, I remember being like, it's funny too, even at my age, like 14 or something, being like, what are you looking forward to most this summer? The Client.
The Client, yeah.
You know?
What, are you kidding me? Tommy Lee Jones as an attorney? Sign me up.
I know. I know. He's going to go toe to toe with Susan Sarandon. You know.
Do you remember there was a TV show based on The Client?
Yeah, that rings a bell now that you say it. I'd forgotten.
It didn't last, but I just remember being like, when I heard about it, I was like, so is it like every episode the same client goes to a different attorney?
Right. Yeah.
Because the title doesn't lend itself to whatever it was. I forget. It didn't last very long. I think it was on CBS. It starred Joe Beth Williams in the Susan Sarandon role, but I just remember that.
You're making
There's
me want
also
to go
a
back and
dangerous-
do or just a rewatch, like these 90s Grisham films.
These Grisham adaptations.
Yeah.
There was also it's not Grisham, but there was a TV series based on Dangerous Minds.
I feel like I'm like, yeah, I remember that, but I don't remember what it looked like.
Yeah, it starred Annie Potts.
Wow. Wow. That feels like the what's that movie? Last Action Hero, where you're going through the blockbuster in an alternate dimension. It's like Dangerous Minds starring Annie Potts.
Yeah, during the 90s, for sure, there was a surplus of TV shows, of network TV shows based on like those popular movies,
Yeah.
But another movie, I saw another bit of a throwback. This is 10 years old now. I just rewatched White House Down.
Wow, I can't believe that's 10 years old.
Crazy, right?
In my head, I'm like, oh yeah, it's like what, like 5 years ago?
Yeah, well, this was part of the great gold rush of White House taken over by terrorists movies in 2000.
Yeah, it was in that whole deal, right, with the asteroid movies and
it's one of them.
Volcano movies. And then we had the White House assault movies.
Yeah, that's right. In 2013, in the spring you had Olympus Has Fallen.
Yeah.
Which spawned a franchise starring Gerard Butler. And then that summer, you had White House Down, directed by Roland Emmerich, starring Channing Tatum and Jamie Foxx. And this one was kind of positioned as the one that was expected to be a bigger hit. And it didn't end up doing that well. But I'll tell you, I liked it then. I like it now. That being said, we're talking about budgets. This one cost $150 million. And so you say, well, don't. I mean, in 2013 dollars, that was still a lot.
Yeah. This feels like that could be like an 80 or something. Like
yes.
Yeah.
Now, my recollection is you have not seen this.
I actually feel like I did. I know I saw Olympus Has Fallen. I feel like I did see this because I remember it's Jamie Foxx is the president, and there's like some wisecracking and things like that. But I don't remember anything from it.
Yeah,
honestly,
I saw it 10 years ago in the theater, and I just kind of forgot about it. And then my 14-year-old just put it on. He was just looking for something to watch, and I ended up sitting down watching it with him. I was like, man, this movie's great, so much fun.
Right.
It's
I can picture that.
It's a throwback,
Yeah. I mean, the Roland Emmerich, even though I thought that Moonfall trailer looked like really, really bad, it was on HBO or something recently, and I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I could see myself in the right mood for, that sort of Emmerich. You know what you're getting. That sort of over the top, lots of characters, kind of cheesy humor, but you're kind of smiling, So, yeah, I like his vibe from time to time.
So another thing I wanted to mention is the last thing that I saw, and this is like right in your wheelhouse, Brian. There's a new docuseries that it was created through like a crowdfund thing, and now it's going to air on the CW.
Oh, okay.
Starting like this weekend as we are recording this. It's called 1982 Greatest Geek Year Ever.
Huh. And this is a crowd-funded show?
It's a crowd-funded documentary series.
Okay.
And they managed to get picked up by the CW.
That's interesting because that feels like such a Netflix thing, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like, like Toys That Built America or that's not the one I'm thinking of. But you know what I mean? Like there's those toys of the 80s.
The toys that made us, movies that made us.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. So that's so interesting. This is actually going to be on network. But I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. This sounds so up my alley.
This is 100%. So basically, it's looking at all of the momentous geek movies that came out in 1982.
Wow. Okay.
One of which being, Brian.
I couldn't possibly guess. What?
Well,
no,
it's your favorite movie, yeah.
Yes.
So the first episode is the Summer of Spielberg, and it gets into E.T. and Poltergeist, both of which
right.
Spielberg had a hand in. But you have episodes that Blade Runner, John Carpenter's The Thing, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Tron, I mean, the list goes on. It's really like when you look at it, like, because I was thinking like I think for us, and I think I can speak for both of us, like we just sort of like 1982 like had already happened by the time we were aware. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right. I think for people our generation, oftentimes we point to like summer of '89 as like our awakening.
Yeah. Yeah. All that stuff was on the table for us once we were ready for that type of thing, right? They were all at the video store. So yeah, it's kind of cool to imagine that summer where that must have been sort of a big shift, which I guess is why they made a series about it.
Exactly, right. Kind of where sci-fi and fantasy and these type of things really moved into a place where it wasn't just one or two. I mean, it was just the entire calendar year.
Yeah.
Was full of these things, and even stuff like Blade Runner and The Thing, which neither of which performed, but now they're considered, among the greatest movies ever made.
Right.
All happened that one magical year on Gordon Street.
That Wayne's World 2?
Yeah.
That's so funny. That was on the 4th of July when I was flipping channels. And I was just saying like, Wayne's World 2, it's not as memorable, but it's got some good little bits in there. And that's definitely one of them.
That's very funny because my folks were over on July 4th, and my dad, out of nowhere, was like, so what's Planet of the Apes about? You ever seen Planet of the Apes? My dad, to me.
Seriously?
True story. And first of all, I'm like, well, my dad knows me very well that at age 43, he's like, you ever heard of this Planet of the Apes thing?
Right. Wait, what in the world?
I'm like, all right, everybody shut up. Here we go. Let's do this.
Yeah, here we go.
And I walk him through the whole thing. I'm like, oh, no, and Charlton Heston. And my dad's like, Charlton Heston, he was a good actor. And I'm like, It's funny you should mention that. And I pulled up the Gordon Street moment.
Oh, did he laugh?
He was amused.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, we should explain it. I mean,
that's a good point. So in Wayne's World 2, circa, when was that? 1994, I think that it came out?
It was like the next year after the first one, which I can't. Yeah, 2, maybe 3, 93, maybe
93. So there's a scene where Wayne, played by Michael Myers, he's rushing to stop the wedding, right, of Cassandra.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She's going to marry Christopher Walken. Yeah, that's it. And so he stops at a gas station and he tells the attendant, "Hey, where's the church on Gordon Street? Gordon Street." And you have this old guy who's like, "Oh, Gordon Street. Well, I remember a time on Gordon Street." And he's doing like this terrible job working through this monologue, at which point,
about a girl. Like, I remember a girl from Gordon
That's right.
Yeah.
So at that point, Mike Myers turns to the camera. He's like, I know it's a small role, but I think we can do better than this. And then like the crew members just take this actor off and they walk Charlton Heston in, who delivers this monologue that leaves Mike Myers weeping.
Very funny. Gordon Street. Yeah.
I once knew a girl on Gordon Street. Yeah, that great, anyway, so check that out. It's going to be on the CW, and it's really good. And it's produced by Mark Altman, who is a writer and showrunner of various things, and also a frequent guest on the Nostalgia Theater podcast. And I'm going to be talking to him about that show and about many other things. So give that a listen.
I will definitely be checking that out.
Well, that's my thoughts on those things. Why don't we take a quick break, and we have some listener letters.
Here's to holiday traditions, the ones that started as a quick laugh but are now irreplaceable. Here's to the recipes that require Grandma's mixing bowl because they just won't taste the same without it. The Chinette brand believes in spending more time on traditions and less time cleaning up. With the Chinette Crystal, Comfort, and Classic collections, we can help make your holiday celebrations better for years to come. Here's to mixing timeless traditions with a few new ones. Here's to us, all of us. To find out more, visit mychinette.com.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
And we are back. And hey, we got an armful of listener communications since the last time we recorded.
I'm just thinking like Wes Anderson now, like listener communique. You know, like Alec Baldwin narrating or something. Email the first.
That's good. So this is a message I got on Twitter from Jason, who this is in reference to our previous episode where we talked about The Flash.
Yeah, I want to talk about this. Yeah.
which I got in a third viewing of that movie just this week because my brother wanted to see it with me, and I was like, well, it may be gone very quickly, so we better get it in quick. So this is from Jason. He says, love your discussion about The Flash and why it might have underperformed. Since your last show, it's become an even bigger flop. Yes, it has. Question, do you think there's any way this could have been a hit, or was it always destined to disappoint? And yeah, let's just first say, I mean, when we recorded, we were in the midst of the opening weekend. We were like, wow, this ain't looking too good. But it over the course of the subsequent 3 weekends or whatever it's been, I mean, it is now it's a catastrophe, the likes of which the Mayans predicted.
They had it wrong. It wasn't 2012. Yeah.
It was 2023.
Yeah.
So this is fascinating to me for a couple of reasons, because again, I've watched it thrice at this, not once, not twice, thrice. And I walked out of this, I'm like, that's a good movie, you know?
I know. I've seen it twice, and both times I saw it with you, and then I saw it with my brother, and he was even like, that was fun.
So this is interesting to me because what I said to you last time, as we were just sort of postulating different scenarios, I was like, I made an analogy of like a Jenga tower where you had managed to alienate several constituencies. And the more I look at this, I'm like, I think that's what happened here, where it's like the Zack Snyder super fans were like, well, Zack Snyder didn't do this, so we're not watching. You pull out that brick. And then the people who are like, well, I don't like Zack Snyder, and this is sort of Snyder adjacent, I'm not going to watch that. You have the people who are like, I watched 9 seasons of The Flash starring this other guy, I don't want to watch this. You lose that audience.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, you keep going, right? I mean,
keep going.
You know, Ezra Miller's had very, very public personal problems, and that might put off people. That's another brick. You know, you're so right. And when you look at these Marvel films, that even when the ones don't do super, super great, there's like this bar that they always hit.
Yeah.
And we are so immersed in that universe now, right? I mean, and I don't know that ever happened with the DC universe with these characters, where you'll even out of obligation show up for some sort of third tier character, right? Where you absolutely will if it has the Marvel label slapped on it.
Well, and the other thing, I talked about this last time, that James Gunn may have inadvertently given this thing another bullet wound on its way out the barn, because him essentially saying 5 months ago or whenever it was, hey, we got this whole line of movies coming out, that our big connected universe. Oh, and there's this stuff here, but it's great.
Right. Another brick.
So a lot of people are like, well, it doesn't matter, quote unquote. Although really, Brian, in life, what matters? what does matter when you take a high level view? I think all of that was a factor. The other thing, and I can't remember if I mentioned this last time, but I mean, because of the Ezra Miller of it all, it ended up being sold on the back of Michael Keaton coming back as Batman. That was, and so in other words, what was intended as value added became, this is what you're here to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as somebody who that approach was squarely aimed at, I'm like, yes, please.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I was very satisfied. However, here's the thing. Think about this. When we were kids and Michael Keaton was the new, fresh, young Batman,
Mm-hmm.
the previous Batman, Adam West, his show ended in 1969.
Okay.
So 20 years.
20 years. Not that long ago.
Not that long. Whereas now, Michael Keaton, the last time he played Batman was 31 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And that Batman may not be one that a lot of parents show their kids. Like some may.
That's right.
But it's not like this, okay, we got to start with Iron Man. And here we go, kid. Like, because this is, if you want to know what's going on in movies,
That's right.
You got to start here. But like that one might just be this, oh, yeah, you know what? My son might like this, or kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's not obligation viewing. So, man, that's a great point. That's 10 extra years. You're totally right.
10 extra years. And it's several additional Batmen.
Yes.
Ago, right? So between 1992 and now, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actors play Batman in the movies.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I as somebody who's like, yes, please, Michael Keaton as Batman. I'm like, hey, I'm all about that Keaton life. However, you and I, Brian, we are in our, dare I say, mid-40s.
Sure, approaching.
Getting there. We're not the main audience that they need,
It's so funny because to recontextualize it, then in a way, it's kind of impressive how well it did. You know what I mean? You're so right. I mean, obviously, that's been the theme of us talking about this movie is how excited we are for that very specific thing. But we can sort of, we're in our bubble, so to speak, for that specifically. And we didn't know how big that bubble was. So
that's right. So I would say to whatever extent it's made money at the box office, that's because of us older folks being like, right on, our Batman is back. I don't think there's not enough of that. So in answer to the question, could it have been? What would it ever have been a hit? I think if it had been released 10 years ago, possibly.
Sure.
I think because the movie itself. And here's the other thing, by the way. Actually, I think it was also a miscalculation to have people calling it, the greatest superhero movie they've ever seen and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's never great.
Right? Like that feels like an unforced error because that was something James Gunn kept saying. And I'm like, well, I mean, I don't think it's that. And I don't think it needs to be. Right. But like, why, like, because then people are like, well, what did Stephen King see, Because he was.
Because he was one of those early. Yeah, that's right.
He's like, I don't like superhero movies, but this one right here, and you're like, cool, right? But I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't really see it,
Yeah, which is too bad because again, I think it's good, and I've seen a lot of people, who had sort of ignored it, but then like, well, I'll go check it out, and then go, oh yeah, no, that was good, So it's just this whole messy result.
It really. The other thing I was thinking about having with this latest rewatch is the bit at the end with well, I guess can we say it at this point? I don't know.
So. I was thinking actually the post credits. Yeah, I mean, if people want to skip ahead maybe a minute.
You have Barry Allen comes back to what he thinks is his present, and then he Bruce Wayne is coming to see him, and oh no, it's George Clooney, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a funny gag. I think it's legitimately funny, and I can see why Clooney agreed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also imagine that it was very confusing for audiences, and I would include myself in that the first time I saw it, where it's like, so is he the new Batman now?
Right. When all of this now is so important, like any sort of nugget you drop or hint or tease.
That's right.
now informs like the next 10 years of your viewing. So it's like you can't almost accept it just on its face as a funny gag. It's sort of like, what does it mean? Yeah.
So so many different factors, but I think it cost just obscene amounts of money, which was stupid.
Yeah. I mean, we can get to that later too.
We'll talk about that too. But like, this is not even like, oh, if they had spent less, it would have been considered a hit. Like, no, it's a flop no matter what. Like, it won't even match Green Lantern from like 10 years ago.
That is mind blowing.
Yeah.
I still, I mean, I know we just explained it and I believe everything we just said, but I still can't wrap my head around that.
That's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so R.I.P. the Flash movie franchise. Anytime soon.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder if once it starts streaming, if it could be one of those things, sort of like Solo, where people slept on Solo a little bit, and then we're like, oh wait, no, this is a lot of fun. But maybe not. I mean, maybe people already have their opinions, and that's formed, and they're just gonna feel how they're gonna feel.
I think, I think they may.
Yeah.
So another thing that the Flash being as catastrophic as it has been, another thing that tells me is that it is probably the absolute right thing to reboot. So despite my qualms about what James Gunn maybe jumping the gun, if you will, in announcing, I think it's clearly the right decision.
Yeah. I mean, this just makes it absolutely clear. But and it kind of makes me feel bad for Aquaman coming up. I'm sure they're like,
I read an interview with James Wan where he's kind of like, well, it's not even like the first one is that connected to the universe. So it's like, you don't have to, like he's like,
right.
You don't have to be associated with that. I'm in hindsight, for as painful as it was for many fans and myself, when Henry Cavill was like, hey, y'all, I'm back. And then like 2 weeks later, he's like, hey, funny story, I'm not back.
Right.
I think that's probably the right thing.
Yeah. I think so too. Just a fresh start.
Right. Like I think a Man of Steel 2 was always going to have to toil with all of that baggage.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, really, when you look at it, like the past 10 years, it's like bad decisions compounded by bad decisions compounded by bad decisions.
Yeah.
It is like a case study.
And it's funny too, what a unique like mess of like universe understanding the Flash is. Cause for me, I don't really care like if it's a Snyder thing or not a Snyder thing. Like it's just Flash movie, Batman's in it, let's have some fun. But like for people that really are tracking this, yeah, it's kind of messy. Like it's kind of a Snyder thing, but not a Snyder thing. But like it's, you know what I mean? Like where does it belong? What universe does it fit into? It's just this weird thing floating around that's kind of tied to stuff, but kind of doesn't feel like it at the same time. So yeah, you may as well just sort of I mean, rip the page off and start again.
And when you really think about it, it feels like the cake was baked once here maybe this will be controversial. Once Batman versus Superman collapsed from weekend 1 to weekend 2, that's like you can point to every bad decision coming from there,
right?
Because we can get into whether Zack Snyder was the guy to guide the universe in its early goings, whatever. All of that was done, right? Decision was made, but they had already committed to making the Justice League, right?
Mm-hmm.
But once it dropped by like 75%. It dropped like Flash level.
Right.
And so then suddenly they're in panic mode and they're trying to change everything, right? So it's like, I've said this on the show. I'm like, once you committed to Justice League, you should have just stuck to that and done whatever you're going to do and not try to course correct while the train was already in motion. And it's like, because think about it, Man of Steel did relatively well. Batman vs. Superman, it dropped hard, but it still did relatively well.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, none of those other movies did well except Aquaman.
Right.
Right? I mean, like Shazam, the first Shazam did okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Trying to think what else. What are the other?
That is
Suicide
interesting
Squad.
In hindsight. With the second one doing so poorly, like the first one was a real anomaly, wasn't it?
It feels like that now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Suicide Squad. The first Suicide Squad did well,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know that anybody loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Like it doesn't.
I mean,
yeah. You know what's funny? It doesn't feel like it comes up hardly ever when people are talking about those films.
I mean, there is a hashtag movement of release the Ayer cut.
Yes. Sure. Which
like,
I mean, I'm not like chomping at the bit for it, but I would watch it. I'm a little curious.
I'd watch it. I'm curious, but I also don't think it's gonna, you know, I don't think it's gonna reach the same level of critical mass as that other hashtag. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to that point, they announced that Superman and Lois Lane have been recast.
Right. That's right.
Superman Legacy, and this is we talked about this on the show. I said this guy David Cornsweet is who they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the guy. Look at that, Brian.
You were on it.
I saw him in Pearl, and I didn't think of him. I did not think of him as Superman. Like, I mean, I wasn't like, oh, he will never play Superman. I was just like, it didn't occur to me. But I was definitely like, oh, I like this guy. He's got presence.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy about that. But more interesting to me is this guy who's been in, various things, not a ton of stuff, but he was in a show called The Politician a couple of years ago, and he did some interviews. Like my pie in the sky casting is I'd love to play Superman.
That's so great. Hey, speak it out loud. You never know if it'll catch.
Talk about manifesting that shit into reality.
Yeah.
I love it. But Rachel Brosnahan is playing Lois Lane.
As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, duh.
Yeah, perfect.
My wife loves Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, so I think she's super excited.
Yeah, Federica did too, which I haven't seen, but she was describing it to me, and I was like, oh, sounds like something I would like. I don't know why I didn't watch that. But
yeah, it seems like it'd be up your alley.
Yeah, and then I remember her from House of Cards, and she was sort of intrepid. I don't remember if she was specifically a journalist, but finding the facts kind of a character.
That's right. So it seems appropriate.
See it. Yeah.
James Gunn has said that this is not going to be an origin story, so we don't, we can avoid the ritual sacrifice of the House of L.
Right.
But it'll be. He said it'll be a workplace origin story.
I like that. That sounds good.
Right. So I think that means it's like how Clark Kent comes to work at the Daily Planet.
Yeah, that's kind of a fun way to do it. Like we already know who he is, so let's see this farm kid come to the big city.
Yeah, I'm completely down. So we'll see. This thing opens in 2025, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's hyperbole to say everything depends on this movie doing well at the box office and being well received by critics.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, I don't envy James Gunn. Let's put it that way.
No, a lot of pressure.
It's just thinking about that. I'm like, nope, hard pass.
Yep. But I think if anyone can do it, just look at Guardians 3, that's going to be one of the top performers this year. People like what he's putting out there, and these characters, whenever there's new iterations, everyone gets re-excited for them. This is one of those characters like Batman that I think you can just keep putting out there, and people will keep being like, all right, let's see what this version is,
Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Here's a note we got from Thomas Olson. He says, Zachy and Brian, my favorite podcasting duo.
Oh,
I think that's us.
Oh, thank you.
That's kind of nice. Brian, congrats on your new show, Young Jedi Adventures.
Thank you.
I know you don't know me, but after listening to the podcast for years and hearing your love for Star Wars, it makes me so happy for you that you get to work on a Star Wars project. I can imagine it's been a dream come true.
Oh, yeah, yes, absolutely. Dude, that's so nice. Thank you, Thomas.
He says, I'm a big Star Wars fan myself, and I've got young kids, 5 and 3, and this has been such a great way to introduce them to Star Wars. They're loving the show so far, so thank you for your work and contributions to the show.
That's exactly what we want to hear. That this was really intended to be like an on-ramp into the Star Wars universe for like an audience that may not be able to sit through an entire film yet. I hear that a lot from parents. They're like, I tried showing my kid A New Hope, but they just couldn't sit still. And so this is like that, introduction to lightsabers and the Force and Jedi, and then once they love it, they can't wait to watch A New Hope. So I love it. I'm so happy to hear that.
I would say personally, 5 and 3 is the exact right age to show the very end of Revenge of the Sith. I think it's time. You gotta show, hey, life is hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Get ready.
Your best friend dismembers you. Before
I send you off to kindergarten, there's some things you need to know.
This shit is real. That's what you do. He also adds, I've got a few questions. Have either of you watched the show Ted Lasso? Brian, I know you have.
Mm-hmm.
If so, what are your thoughts on it? And I will add, this is me, Zachy. The show is now over. Have you watched the final season?
I have. Yeah. Did you watch any of it?
I watched the first 2 episodes on my plane ride actually last year, and I've been meaning to get back to it. I just haven't been able. That was like, I got to watch this with Amina, and then we just whenever I set a show aside to do that, we end up never watching it.
Yeah, no, I understand how that goes. Federica adored season 1, and so she, sat me down, was like, watch this, you'll love it. And I did. And I think season 1 is just absolutely perfect and lovely and like just a literal hug of a viewing experience. And then season 2 got like a little wonky. I think there's several things that happened. Like, I think I had read that when they were writing season 2, season 1 was being hailed, by reviews and whatnot. And I wonder if it almost threw them a little bit, because then it felt like they leaned a little too heavy into the tweeness of it sometimes.
Okay. So they bought their own hype, you're saying?
Maybe. And then they also apparently originally had, say, I'm making this number up, but let's say like 10 episodes. But when it became a hit, they're like, hey, can you do 13? And so it's very noticeable that there are like 3 episodes just kind of shoehorned in. And it was like, well, there was moments to enjoy, but it didn't feel as complete and satisfying as the first season. And then the final season, season 3, still, I mean, nothing can touch that first season, but I feel like they got a little bit back on track. And, we're remembering that we're rooting for this team. We do care about their success, and while also, digging into the characters and their relationships and making sure that mattered. And when it was all said and done, when it ended, I was like, I'm going to miss this. So yeah, my overall was, I definitely think it's for people looking for something just plain nice, just to feel good. It's not a cynical show. It's just a real, it doesn't aim to be, it's just like a nice show about people, and it's nice to be nice, it's almost what we could say about it. And, yeah, I definitely would recommend it overall. I think you and Amina would like it.
I'm sure we would. Yeah. We just got to get back to it. Thomas also has one last question. He says, with the release of Indy 5, I'm curious how you each would rank the 5 films. And I'm like, well, maybe we can hold that question until our discussion of Dial of Destiny later in this episode. But he says, lastly, did either of you watch the Young Indiana Jones series that aired in the 90s?
Yes.
And we tried to watch it. I know that.
I mean, I want to say Last Crusade was my first indie movie. I can't remember. I have this memory of seeing Raiders as a sleepover, and I can't remember which came first. But Last Crusade made a huge impression on me in the theaters. It was the only thing I wanted for my birthday, was that on VHS, right? So like, I'm 9 years old. And then when it's announced that there's going to be a TV show, like, there was no TV show I wanted to watch more. Like, I was so ready for that. And I think it was, I wonder if you had the same experience. You watched it and it was like kind of dry.
Yeah.
It was almost like one of those movies they show you in school where it's like a history lesson, but they try to drop a character into it to give you someone to follow along with.
That's right.
And I remember not loving it like I wanted to, but continuing with it, just because of the indie angle. And so a lot of it is erased from my mind, if I'm being honest. I can remember the boy. I remember Sean Patrick Flannery, right?
Flannery.
Actually, and they just dropped them on Disney Plus, and I started the pilot. I watched the first 5 minutes.
Don't start with the pilot. Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, well, it was fascinating because I know Lucas.
If you start with the pilot, you are ensuring you will never watch anything past the pilot.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it was fascinating because it's very, very early digital visual effects, right?
Sure.
And Lucas used that show as sort of like a testing lab for what he wanted to do with the Star Wars prequels. And it's kind of fascinating watching a couple shots. Like there's one where I think he's on the roof with a dog and his parents are looking at him in the house, and it looks really bad, obviously, because it's all new and stuff. But it's kind of fascinating, like, oh, wow, this is an experiment. This is we are where we are now because he tried this here. But anyway, back to the show. What was your experience with it?
Well, I guess I was fortunate in that my first exposure to it was in spring of '92. My family were visiting the States from Saudi Arabia, so I had missed the pilot movie, which was at the time it was called Young Indiana Jones and the Curse of the Jackal.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, it was like you had two stories that were woven together. One with the young 10-year-old Indy played by Corey Carrier, and then the Sean Patrick Flannery version. I saw one of the later ones, and it was like one of the World War I episodes. And like, I thought it was okay, but it was very dull. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's sort of, and we've talked about this before in one of our commentary tracks, where it's like the films established that like Temple of Doom is his first exposure to like supernatural stuff. And so by definition, then everything before Temple of Doom is going to be like, just run of the mill stuff.
Right.
A little bit of a history lesson. And so I never got into it. The one episode I was very excited for was, the one that Harrison Ford guest starred in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which was kind of like a little bit of a relaunch of the show, but of course he was only in that one. And yet I will say it irks me even more what has been done with that show now, like the version that's streaming on Disney Plus and whatever, where they took those original episodes and they stitched them together into sort of movie length, and they chopped off the wraparounds featuring George Hall as old Indy. If we consider Harrison Ford now as old Indy, there's old Indy. And not because I thought those wraparounds were particularly good. I think I've said before, like, I didn't like that Indy. Like, I don't want to see him as this kind of crotchety old guy who nobody pays attention to, and yet I'm like, but that's what was made. Like, that's the version. So I'm like, it should exist in that form, because I don't know that this Frankenstein monster of a thing that they have now, I don't think that does justice to what was done back then either.
Right. It's kind of sad that you can't, that just isn't available. Yeah,
it isn't available in any form. I think that's unfortunate. So what my view with the whole Adventures of Young Indiana Jones thing is, I'm kind of like, I'm glad it exists as a canon for the character. But damned if I'm going to sit through all of those.
Isn't that sad though? It should be sort of exciting. Like, this series, like, yeah, of course it's not like the films, but it's there if I want to watch something one night. It's such a bummer that I don't feel that way.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones.
Yep. Same.
It was a very big deal though when it came out. Like, there was a lot of hype, there was a lot of merchandise, and then it just kind of fizzled away.
Yeah. I thought I read something recently even where they were saying, like, the ratings just weren't good from the jump.
Yeah.
But wanting to have a relationship with Lucas, they gave it 2 seasons, and yeah. But
yeah, and I mean, it's funny because it aired on ABC, which was later purchased by Disney, which in turn later purchased Lucasfilm. So it was weirdly, it was like vertically integrated about, long before it was actually vertically integrated.
Right. But I remember watching some like special effects or like ILM documentary or something, and not the recent one, but one like several years ago, and them showing, this was one of the first times where if we wanted Indy to be surrounded by, people on horseback. We only had to shoot 2 people, and then we'd copy them, and then we could digitally drop them in. And I remember seeing that and going, wow, cool. And like copy paste basically. And like, that's just what we do now, so it's kind of even worth noting in just sort of the history of special effects, its contribution, I guess.
It plays a role. And I think also it was Harrison Ford's appearance on the Young Indie show that sort of kickstarted the idea of doing a 4th movie. So there's also that in terms of its place in Indiana Jones history, I suppose. Is
that true? So like he and Lucas were on set like, we should do this again. Like that, is that what you mean?
In essence, yeah.
Huh. All right.
Because I think that was where both Harrison Ford and George Lucas were like, yeah, we had fun doing that, and then because that episode was, I think, beginning of 93, I think.
Yeah, he has that fugitive beard.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So so it would have been. It was definitely like early part of 1993 when that episode aired. Yeah.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to. Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+. Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Anyway, hey, here's another note we got, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
And this is from Alex Naom, who this is in reference to our commentary track that we just dropped for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He says, as is always the case, your latest commentary track was a sterling listen, even without watching the movie along with you. It's wonderful hearing you two gush over a film because you never neglect also doing a deep dive into the script's nuances and behind-the-scenes tidbits.
That means a lot.
It does, yeah. He says, it does make me curious, though, to listen to you do a commentary track for something which you both detest. Your usual cheery and open-minded demeanor is a refreshing tonic in today's cynical landscape of movie criticism, but grumpy Zachy and exasperated Brian would be an interesting corner of the multiverse to explore.
I love that. I wonder what we could do. I know we could come up with something.
I don't know if I have a movie that I just outright detest.
I know.
Right?
I know that's pretty strong, but I'm sure there's something we could be like, yeah, I don't know if we'd get grumpy, but we'd probably sort of kick back and just start laughing, just making each other laugh.
Like for me, detest it has to be something where I'm just like, why does this exist?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we'll think about it. We'll think about that.
It would be like there's a movie about some freaking goddamn idiot on YouTube who created a YouTube personality that's the most great.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, Fred, I think he's called.
Fred. That's yes. Now, how is it that I just said obnoxious YouTube personality and you knew exactly what I meant?
I don't know. Which is funny because to your kids, they're probably like, "What, that old thing?" Like for us, it's like this recent sort of thing. But like,
right. Oh my God. I used to see the trailer for that at like Target or whatever. And I was like, like I felt like we'd failed as a species, you know.
I know.
If it brought us to that point, like that's what I think of as detestable, you know.
Yeah. Where it's
And
just
no, we won't be
shrill, almost like that's the point, to be shrill, and it's not even.
Yeah,
like,
for those of you who are like, what are
charming.
you talking about? It's this kid, I don't remember his name, but he created this YouTube character with like this high pitched voice.
Yeah, like digitally tweaked, like sort of like Judge Doom at the end of Roger Rabbit.
That's what, yeah, and that's the whole bit, I think.
Yeah, and he just, I don't know, goes through life, but he's got this really high-pitched, squeaky, annoying voice.
I think, Brian, YouTube characters are my least favorite genre of YouTube content, where people have created these obnoxious personas.
Yeah, I'm realizing that I don't like know a ton of them.
There's a few, you know, I mean, this idiot, Fred, I forget the real person's name, but there's another.
This idiot.
I don't need to know, you know. There's another one, Miranda Sings. You seen this?
I've been reading about this lately. Yeah, I was not aware of her at first.
Yeah, I was aware of her because some of my students would talk about her, and at least some of them were like, "Oh, you should watch it." And then I watched it, and I tried not to hold that against them when I was grading them in my classes.
Right.
But yeah, now there's some, you know, so I don't know the details, but I guess some controversy about the actor who plays her. But I'm just like, I hate this whole thing.
What is it? What is it specifically?
I think it's people find it, you know what it's like. It's like stupid 1990s SNL recurring characters.
Okay. Which even in that moment, that was meant to be ironic.
That's
right. Whereas like Toonce is the car driving cat, you know, like, isn't this like kind of stupid, you know, or like massive head wound Harry, you know, like,
yes.
But yeah, I see. Okay. But then just doing it over and over again as an actual series.
Because that's what happened on SNL too, right? Like there was a time where they realized we should hold these recurring characters in reserve, right? But like, I don't know off the top of my head, like Debbie Downer stops being funny pretty quick if you're seeing her all the time. Like Debbie Downer,
she's like a recurring
yeah, right. There's like one funny Debbie Downer sketch, and it's the first one.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So that's a lot of these YouTube people. It's like, no, you're done.
Right.
We don't need Fred the movie.
Right. But we got one.
We certainly did. Lucas Crookshank. That's the person's name.
Okay. I wonder what he's doing now.
I'm curious. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully he made his money and was like, hey.
He is 29 years old.
Wow.
And no, Brian, there's 3 Fred movies.
Is there really?
God help us all.
Wow.
Fred the movie. Fred 2, Night of the Living Fred. And Fred 3. Not Fred yet. No, it's called Camp Fred. That's what it's called.
You just made that up? That was good.
Yeah. Okay, well that's
I'll sleep when I'm Fred. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's more time than I intended to spend talking about Fred ever on this show.
Okay, well we know which one to do now.
Yeah, I guess so. Alex says, by the way, during the Roger Rabbit commentary, you brought up how Robert Zemeckis dips his toes into the horror pool, but never dives fully in. I was wondering what your thoughts are on What Lies Beneath. It's been a long time. That one totally slipped my mind.
Me too.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember very much liking it. Granted, it isn't full-on horror, but it probably is the most intense film he's ever made. What a pairing as well. Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer are. Plus, it was written by Clark Gregg. I did not know that. Yeah, I didn't know that. I feel like it's a forgotten gem, so if you do get the time in the coming days or weeks to watch it, I would love to hear a mini review of it. I shall do the same.
I would like to go back to that. I don't know that I've seen it since the theater, honestly.
That was one of the first instances of Harrison Ford kind of mixing things up a little bit.
Totally. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was around 2000. Castaway, right?
Summer of 2000. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I think he made that while Tom Hanks was losing the weight, you know, like they shot half of Castaway, then he and his crew went and made What Lies Beneath. Then they finished Castaway.
That's right.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to revisit that. I remember liking it. Like I mean, it's very much, I think, our horror,
Yes.
kind of level where it's like a lot of creep factor, but it's not, hack them up or anything. So yeah, I'd be kind of curious to revisit that. I just remember the bathtub scene. I mean, that was kind of
That's right.
the iconic moment for that movie.
And that's kind of an example of what I was talking about earlier, where you have a star-based high concept, and it's sold and succeeds based on the actors who are in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
That was because I think the year prior, Harrison Ford had been in K-19, The Widowmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And that was him trying to mix it up by being like, hey, I'm going to do this Russian accent that nobody wants to hear me do.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that I ever saw that.
I didn't think it was bad, but I was like, I can't take Harrison Ford seriously doing this voice.
Sure. Yeah.
And I have a feeling that was one of those things where everyone was like, don't do that.
Right. Right.
And he's like, I'm Harrison effing Ford, damn it.
Right.
But yeah, that's worth checking out. And he also says, I believe your summer break is coming up, so I hope you both enjoy any time off you have. I'm stoked for the upcoming releases in July. You might say I'm on a mission to doll myself up for the opportunity to see some great films. That's good.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I would say the same. Like, we've already spoken in our household how we're going to do that double feature.
You got Mission Impossible, Barbie, and Oppenheimer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Barbie and Oppenheimer in the same weekend.
That a lot of people betting on Oppenheimer, which I find so interesting, because if I were to bet, I'd say probably Barbie does better.
Oh, me too, without a doubt.
However, I think it's so interesting that Oppenheimer is like in the conversation as like, this is going to be one of the summer blockbusters. Because that's just Christopher Nolan's big dick energy, right? Like,
yeah.
But
they're not even.
That's when that shit's coming out.
Yeah, I think that's almost James Gunning it a little bit, because it's like this R-rated feel bad movie. I mean, I think more people are going to show up for it than would if it was made by someone else. I definitely think that. But I don't think they should be compared to one another. Barbie's a whole different thing and a different audience. And yeah, I don't know. But I want to see both. So
we'll be talking about both of them in a few weeks. So.
Yeah.
And then real quick, lastly, I have a message here from Adam O, who has been our, he's been monitoring our Magnificent Amberson mentions. By our, yes. I mean my Magnificent Amberson mentions. And he says, I just saw this article and I couldn't not share it with you. Apparently the Magnificent Ambersons isn't even the Magnificent Ambersons.
I saw this article too, by the way.
Yeah, and this is we talked about it before about how the original cut of Ambersons has been lost to the ages, and so it's kind of this mythical thing. And I've said before, I'm like, it's a testament to how good what Orson Welles made is, that even kind of this Baudelarized version of what was released at the time is still pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's funny. In my head, I was like, yeah, the Reader's Digest version somehow still ends up being
yes,
revered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is an article at NPR. It says, a Welles superfan named Brian Rose, himself an accomplished filmmaker, has used animation and countless hours of painstaking research to recreate missing footage from the Magnificent Ambersons. And this whole, I mean, the original cut that Orson Welles made, 131 minutes, which is not that long, by the way. But RKO was like, no, it's too long. So they cut it down to 88 minutes. And then they just like flushed the cut footage down the toilet or something.
Yeah. Devastating.
It's just gone,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this right here, this is my release the Snyder cut. You know what I
mean? You're right.
I'm like, I want to see this. So it's fascinating. I think it's kind of this combination of CG and animation, all this other stuff. to try to approximate what was actually intended by Orson Welles. And I'm like, man, I want to find a way to see this. I love the quote from the guy. He's like, there's it's unclear who owns the rights and whether this thing is even legal. He says, well, the thought was to beg forgiveness later. Like, just do it and then figure it out later. I'd love to see this.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I've not seen the original. I want to watch the original first, but I think this is sort of like that Donner cut thing where you're like, look, this is an approximation, right? Like, you can't say that this is exactly finally the version you always wanted to see, but like, how cool that someone brought you as close as possible, right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Did you see the animated footage?
I glanced at it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
I'm all about it. I'm all about as many people seeing the Magnificent Ambersons as possible. That's
I got to get on it.
I would love to hear your thoughts on that movie.
Yeah. Well, and I hate to give RKO this, but hearing that it's 88 minutes, I'm like, well, I can do that.
Yeah, well, speaking of lost cuts, I mean, I thought this was interesting. You and I were texting about this earlier, how there's the original Joel Schumacher edit of Batman Forever.
Yeah.
Which Kevin Smith got his hands on, and he's been screening it at his Smodcastle Theater in New Jersey.
Fascinated by this because this is one of those things where you hear that, yeah, there's a Schumacher cut, and you're like, yeah, probably in a locker somewhere. We'll never see it. But then when, Smith's like, no, I have it, and I'm going to show it.
Right.
Then it becomes like, oh, well, can I see it?
And I mean, just from the description, it sounds like something, because you and I we talked through Batman Forever a couple of years ago,
mm-hmm.
and my sense, correct me if I'm wrong, we're both kind of like, no, we like it.
It's fine. Yeah,
we don't mind it. But there's definitely stuff in there that separates it from the next one. Batman and Robin, which was more. It was just more.
Yes.
Whereas Batman Forever, there's the DNA of the previous films is much more present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so a little bit darker and sort of, letting Val Kilmer be more broody and whatnot in the context of a bit more of an arc. And I'm like, well, that sounds interesting to me. Like, I don't imagine my opinion of the movie is going to change that drastically.
No, but if there is a slightly different version of it, just to observe that as sort of like a curiosity, like I am curious.
Yeah,
I would happily watch that. I can't believe that we were saying this, that Smith can even screen it. Like, that feels weird to me that it's not being shut down, which I almost take to mean maybe Warner Brothers is like testing the waters a little bit. Like, maybe we could make money off of this, like, let them show it once or twice. And if people say they want to see it, maybe it could be content for our streaming service.
Well, we'll see about that.
Well, before we watch it quickly before they yank it.
Yeah, before they pull it for tax reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I agree with that. I feel like this might be closer to happening than not.
Mm-hmm.
Akiva Goldsman, who wrote the movie, has said that the cut that exists is basically done with the exception of one or two inserts. And I think they have like temp music from the Elfman movies.
Right.
For the Elfman scores. And yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that there's a ton of effects work or whatever that would need to be done, because it sounds like most of the stuff they cut is the character moments.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's the stuff I'm interested in.
Same. Yeah. And I think, we're also in a moment in time where people are really savvy with stuff like filmmaking more than ever. And I think especially the audience for this type of thing would forgive, stuff, like cables in the background or whatever that they haven't cleaned up.
I love that the opportunity exists for stuff like this to potentially be released. I mean, because of the multiple streams, literal streaming, and just the ways in which they can monetize this stuff. I mean, like, why not make it accessible?
Yeah, same.
So that should be interesting. But And if there is news for that, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it in future episodes if something actually ends up happening.
Definitely. Yeah.
But let's take another short break, and we will talk about this week's big release.
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love, only at David's Bridal.
And we are back. And Brian, you know who else is back?
Who's that, Zeki?
Why, it's Dr. Henry Walton Jones II.
And isn't that nice?
It really is.
Doesn't it feel good? Yeah.
Now you and I, we got to see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks before it opened.
Thanks to you. Yep.
Well, thanks to the people who invited me. So thank you, Disney publicists. But I have to say, I am so grateful to have experienced it with you as just like a friend thing, but also just as a society thing. I'm really glad I had my thoughts.
Yes.
Because this movie came out and it was tracking low. Like I suspected this was not going to do particularly well.
Yeah, not Crystal Skull numbers, which in hindsight, I mean, those were phenomenal.
Crystal Skull was, I believe, the second highest grossing movie the year that it came out.
Yeah, huge.
So massive hit. And this one, I was looking at the tracking, and I said to you last time, I was like, when I talk to my kids, I'm getting Death Wish 5 vibes.
Yes, right.
In that, when that movie came out in 1994, I was like, "What the hell is this?" And that was what a lot of kids were feeling about the new Indiana Jones. So I had steeled myself for that. So another point that I think is very valid, and I don't know that anyone's talking about it as much, is how between Last Crusade and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones was still present in pop culture. Right? So you had 19 years where you had novels and comic books and video games, lots of video games. You know, there was always, whenever like, home video, VHS, here's a new hype campaign. And the DVD, here's a new hype campaign. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you feel this way, but like for me, it's during that period, Star Wars and Indiana Jones always felt kind of interlinked.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And yet, when you think about it, between 2008 and now, what Indiana Jones stuff has there been in pop culture?
You know, if I think about it being referenced at all, it's probably, they just came out on Blu-ray and I got, 3 Blu-rays and a coaster. Kind of like ragging on the Crystal Skull, right? So it's sort of like I love those movies. Too bad the last one wasn't that great. Like if it was, you're right, like talked about at all. Like there weren't, necessarily action figures out or being re-released in theaters necessarily. I mean, occasionally, but you know what I mean? Like not, I think in the first 3 are very close to one another. I forget that they all came out in the same decade. The first 3, that's crazy to me. And then I think the fourth one, there was a lot of anticipation. It's like, this thing that we love is coming back, and I still look at the box office numbers for that and I'm shocked how well it did. Yeah. But now we've had that experience. We've had that thrill of him returning, and it was sort of like, a mixed bag. And so, I can see where it's just, it hasn't remained like fervent in the conversation, like you're saying.
Well, and just as a comparison with Star Wars, look at all the Star Wars stuff completely separate from the movies there was between 2005 and 2015. right? I mean, they kept the pump primed. There was action figures and video games and cartoon shows and everything. So it never felt like, oh, it's that old thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I have a video that I just saw recently in my Facebook memories of my second kid. So he was born in 2009. This is from from 2013. So 10 years ago. He was 3 or 4, and he's like singing the Indiana Jones theme.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. So I show that to embarrass him because now he's 14, and that's the fun of being a parent. You can do that. But I was like, how many kids were singing the Indiana Jones theme during the last decade?
Right.
And
It's like it depended on the parents.
Exactly. Right. Like I'm guessing I'm the exception rather than the rule.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it feels like my point is this, like knowing that, because Disney has run things for a little while. And even before that was Lucasfilm was in charge. Like they didn't do anything to add value to Indiana Jones. So then I say, well, why on earth would you spend so much money, $500 million making this thing?
Yeah, because as you know, the numbers not being quite what they would like, it's still kind of impressive when you make your Death Wish 5 comparison. Like it made like 80 over the holiday weekend. Like that you should have had a metric that made that feel great. In terms of budget.
Right. I mean, it's the equivalent of like, Ghostbusters Afterlife, if they spent $300 million making that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The whole reason they're doing a sequel to that is because it was relatively cheap.
Right.
Relatively.
Right.
And when you're playing to that niche audience, it's odd to, I mean, it's, again, I'm just fascinated by some of the thinking that goes on here,
And I guess I'm also having to reconcile the fact that maybe this is more niche than I realized in this moment. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because he's still beloved, clearly. I mean, a lot of people, even at the theater, I saw people in hats and shirts and things like that. But you also have to, factor in his place at this moment also, like you're saying.
That's right. A corollary to that is, I think the performance of this movie has likely killed any chance of that Lethal Weapon 5 that they were talking about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's going to have to be like a straight to Max or whatever it's called now.
Which I don't think that's going to happen because Max is cutting bait left and right,
That's true. But were it to happen at all, I doubt it would be some big summer release. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, or it needs to cost like $80.
Right.
And then he'll make a profit.
Yeah.
What I was I was going to say I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting this too. The internet discourse became ridiculous about this movie. Where it's like, oh, Disney went woke with Indiana Jones and all this stuff. And I'm like, God, this is exhausting,
It's funny. I've been seeing, I remember when they put it out at Cannes first. And
so first of all, Brian, let us say that was perhaps the biggest marketing misfire Disney could have possibly done with this movie.
It's a little baffling, because we already have let people know how we feel. We liked it, like we said that like in our last episode. But even watching it, I'm like, well, I mean, what do you expect? At that type of event, those sort of people who are seeing certain types of movies and then watching this, popcorn movie, and this movie is already going to be divisive just based on your like personal history with this character and whether or not you're satisfied seeing him as an older person, right? So there's just so many factors to it. Yeah. And so anyway, these lukewarm sort of reviews were coming out of Cannes, and from where I'm sitting, because I'm not on Twitter and I wasn't seeing a lot of like the woke quote unquote conversations, but like I said, I'm on this Indiana Jones page, which is funny because it's like one of the things that pops up the most in my feed. Like there's just so many posts on it. I mean, it makes sense right now, but there was just so many people prepared to be disappointed. And I was just desperate to watch it. And it was so fun having seen it, seeing these people anticipating it, and then when it came out, everyone being like, "Hey, I really like that."
Yeah.
And so I was seeing this real positive reaction. Like, wow, I don't understand what those reviews were about. Like I had a great time with this. So that was kind of what I was seeing in internet discourse, but I guess
I think anecdotally, your average moviegoer, that has been their response, which is why I think the whole Cannes premiere was just such a misguided effort to sort of get the word out, because essentially they screened it like 6 weeks ago at Cannes, and the review embargo. There was no review embargo because reviews dropped right away, and they were mixed to negative, I would say. And so essentially you had about 6 weeks of time for the bad buzz to build. Right? As opposed to screening it closer to the premiere, because if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, which I'm not defending Rotten Tomatoes, but the number, the tomato score went from like 55 to 68.
Sure.
Once the majority of reviews were out there. And so it's like it was just 6 weeks of bad buzz.
Right. And then probably putting in people's minds like, "Oh, I knew it."
That's right.
And then that's like what they're walking in with.
That's right.
Or not walking in with.
And so you've got that, and you've got, going back to what I was alluding to earlier, you've got that portion of I don't even call them fans. I mean, I don't think you can be so miserable all the time and be a fan of anything, but who are like, oh, there's like a female character and she's cocky, and how dare they, like, you know what I mean? And this, and I've seen this from multiple people who are like, oh, it's the they've degraded another like classic male character, and I'm like, how fragile are you?
I know.
Like it's so odd to me, because honestly, I look at this movie, and maybe going back to our conversation we were having earlier this episode, maybe it's because Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and our what we sort of our experience when we watched that movie, like that just disabused me of expecting anything to approximate what it was like to watch Last Crusade or whatever.
100% that was the case for me. I know that experience prepared / changed me / it readied me for whatever this was going to be. Yeah, I went into this much differently than I did the last one. Absolutely.
And you and I have both seen Dial of Destiny twice now. And certainly for me, I had a positive impression going in. Leaving our first screening, and so with the second one, kind of like you said, like now you know where it's going, so you're paying attention for different things. So I wasn't expecting my opinion to change drastically, but I would say that I appreciated more things about it after my second viewing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, I mean to really get down to it, like I would say I really enjoyed this movie, and I think it's. I definitely have thoughts, and I have things like, oh, this might have been cool, or, I might have this or whatever. But how can you not, when you're thinking of a series where there's at least 3 movies that mean the world to you, so you're going to have an opinion on another one, and especially another one coming from a different voice, a different filmmaker. And so, I mean, we can get into those things, and I still do feel those things, but like when all is said and done at the end of the day, I just wanted to not hate it, and I wanted to have a good time with my friend. I wanted to go on another adventure with Indiana Jones, and I did, and I had a really fun time. So, like for me, that's a win.
I agree with that, and I think when you look at the box office, which as of now, I think it's at around 100 million domestically, and that's a disappointment partially because they spent the GDP of Zimbabwe making this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a lot of COVID weirdness in there, and Ford got injured, right? So I'm sure that didn't help. And yeah, it shot up there. for sure.
The budget, the production budget, we're looking at best estimate around 325 million production, and then another 100 million of marketing and P&A and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So now this is, I mean, it doesn't have to be Indiana Jones. It could be anything. If you're spending that much money, how do you intend to make that money back? Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so to me, and we mentioned this last time, that, well, this movie is 2.5 hours long, and above and beyond the fact that when a movie's that long, you get less screenings in per night. That's 20, let's say 20 minutes could have been chopped. That's 20 minutes of budget that could have been saved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to me, certainly, I look at this, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree, but I'm like, there's at least one action sequence where I'm like, you probably could have lost that and saved some money.
I agree with that. Yeah. We were talking about it, you and I, and then when I saw it again with the other group, like especially actually watching Crystal Skull the night before, like this movie feels a little more stuffed, a little busier. And I've heard some other people even say that like the action scenes, while they're impressive, they also, you might not have missed one of them, like sort of like what you're saying, and to really start to get in maybe like more specific about my thoughts on some of the action sequences. My brother said it well, where he was like, well, I've seen a car chase, and I was like, yeah, like it's not that it wasn't well done, because it was, and it was cool because it did look like a lot of it was practical. And I was really impressed when you could see like a woman hanging on the back of a car, and then a car coming the other way and knocking off a door. I'm like, whoa, that looks dangerous. Like, that's cool. That's what I want to see. But like the real charm and what is magical about Indiana Jones is, making it hyper specific. Like, he's got to get the Ark out of that truck. And so he'll go over the truck. He'll get kicked out. He'll go under the truck. He'll go around the truck. And then you get to the end of it, and then you get the theme because he did it, and then in the tank, it's like my dad's in a tank and all I have is a horse, so it's like you stop the gun, then you get on the tank, then you're on the side of the tank, then the dad's got to do something. Like, it's very, like, the goal is very, very clear, and it's really inventive, something really special that we're seeing take place. And if I could, I wish that the action sequences in this had felt a little bit more focused and urgent.
Yeah.
A little more specific in their goals, and a little more inventive in what was taking place.
Right.
So that's why I think this, I'm like, I wish there had been a little bit more of that sort of whatever it is to Indiana Jones, that Indiana Jones magic in those things. And I think that would have gone a long way. But that's not to say that I didn't have a good time. Like, that's why it's, at the end of the day, I still had it was a fun romp.
Right. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds about budgets and stuff like that, because big picture, I mean, who cares? It's not coming out of our pocket. But that being said, I saw a quote from the Jez Butterworth or John Henry Butterworth, one of them, talking about how they're screenwriters, how the great thing about Indiana Jones is you can come up with any idea and nobody's like, oh, we can't afford that.
Sure.
And I was like, well, maybe somebody should have said that.
Right.
I mean, it's worth remembering that Raiders was meant to be like Spielberg's low budget apology after 1941.
Right. Sure.
Like, oh no, I can work on low budget. I think certainly for me, right there's the chase sequence that you alluded to. And then there's an underwater sequence.
Yes.
Right. And of those two, I say, well, the underwater like, we've never seen that in an indie movie.
Sure.
So if we have to pick, I would pick that one.
Mm-hmm. And maybe add a little twinkle to it. Like,
right.
Yes, I like the location, like you say, because it was different, but it really does just become like, grab the thing, but there's like eels, which is a great joke, by the way, trying to get the snake thing in. And, but then it just kind of becomes like, and then they just come back up. And like, if there was some sort of crazy thing that I've never seen before, I think it might have felt a little like, oh, I got to watch that again. like that
Yeah.
specific moment, you know?
Yeah. Now that being said, it's again, the reactions that I've seen have been very interesting from the people who disliked it, where it's like, oh, you know, what it comes down to, and I'm sort of paraphrasing, it comes down to like, oh, this isn't like those old movies because he's an old man now, and I don't want to see him like this, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing a surprising amount of that. I didn't when we saw it and I had my experience with it, I did not anticipate that feeling.
No, I didn't either. And I was thinking about that. I was like, well, here's the thing. Either you lock Indy into a particular time period and you say Indiana Jones exists, you know, between 1935 and 1945, and we just have, that's when the adventures happen and we have different actors play it, right? That was an option that the filmmakers had like 30 years ago.
Sure.
I think once you did Crystal Skull and you said, oh, okay, Indy's an old man now, once you've moved the timeline forward, you're kind of locked into that. And so for me, that was never not an option. I was like, well, I want to see Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. Right? And to me, if we say, okay, now Harrison Ford is 80, and I mean, he's playing younger in the movie, but whatever, he's playing like 70 in the movie, right? But once we say that we're doing this, then this is me, I'm like, well, I don't want to see the old timey stuff. I don't want to see him hanging from a tank and all this. I want to see what is it like to be Indiana Jones at that stage of your life.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think that's why we we both enjoy.
I think so, right? So yeah. I mean, and I'll tell you something else, because last time I alluded to the movie Rocky Balboa, I remember very distinctly watching Crystal Skull, which was 2 years after Rocky Balboa, and I remember thinking, I wish it was more like that, like Rocky Balboa, because that's Rocky, 16 years after the last movie. He's been through tragedy. He's grappling with like, what is my life like now? And I found that very compelling. And it made the journey that he goes on in that film more engrossing for me, that he's experienced tragedy and who is he, and it gave a chance for Sylvester Stallone to be very vulnerable with this very iconic role, and that's the stuff that spoke to me the most about this. Like, well, and you said it best. The film starts. There's the prologue set in 1944 with the de-aged Harrison Ford, and some people like that sequence, some people don't. I actually, just speaking to that sequence, the technology still kind of takes me out of it. But I'm glad it's in the movie. I'm glad that sequence is in the movie.
I agree. And I don't know if you had this experience, but the first time we saw it was on an IMAX screen, and it was huge. And right. And I was like, oh, wow. I thought we were doing a little better than this these days. Like it looked a little smudgy, like the lip sync wasn't super great. But when I watched it on a regular, still very big screen, it actually played a little better for me.
And I think part of it is because you've already had the experience of telling your brain, shut up, brain. No, that is real. Where your brain
that's
is
a good point. That's
right?
a good point. And I will give them, there were a couple shots where I was like, whoa, like that, I mean, it's when he's supposed to do like really subtle emoting that you can sort of see it where it's not moving like a face would. But by and large, though, I'm just happy the sequence is in there because I thought it was a lot of fun.
I think so. And so from there we jump to, 1969, and you've got, Indy is woken up by Beatles music, and he's banging on his neighbor's door, turn that racket down. And I love what you said. You said, man, time comes for us all.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that's what's interesting. Again, like, why on earth would we do an Indiana Jones movie starring Harrison Ford at this stage, and try to replicate that same heightened action of those earlier three films? I mean, this is there's no point unless there's a reason for Indy to go on this adventure, and that reason would have to be more than just, hey, I feel like going on an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, that is really the theme of the movie, and it's like you said, I mean, we haven't like James Bonded this and switched actors. Like, we actually get the opportunity to see the same person in this stage of their life. And so, I mean, that just becomes that is what it is. And with this whole plot having to do with time and, your place in the world and time and whatnot, like, it makes sense. At the same time, I absolutely can understand for some people if they're like, yeah, but maybe that's, not as fun as I thought it would be to watch. Like, I can't appreciate that. But I'm just saying that, like, I went into it and like, well, that's what the tools that we had. So why not tell this type of story? Sort of like you were saying with Rocky Balboa. And I thought they did a good job telling that story with this actor who clearly cared about telling this story.
That's also been, I mean, when you look at interviews with Harrison Ford, I think to some extent Harrison Ford realizes this is not merely his last ride as Indiana Jones. It's probably, he knows it's his last ride as being the top billed star in this type of film,
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, he's at the Charlton Heston and True Lies stage of his career.
Right.
with what he's going to be doing in Captain America or whatever. And I'm like, man, what a run, right? And the fact that he got to kind of do this film, like you and I, we talked about this before. I saw somebody said this online where of those original three, you have the first two are like a statement about a modernization of old serial tropes. Last Crusade is Spielberg's final statement on Indiana Jones. Crystal Skull is George Lucas's final statement on Indiana Jones, and Spielberg's kind of along for the ride. Dial of Destiny is Harrison Ford's final statement on Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
He left it all on the field.
Yeah, and it reminds me a little bit of Francis Ford Coppola, how he considers Godfather 3 like an epilogue.
Mm-hmm.
Like this sort of feels like an epilogue for this character.
And I would say that Crystal Skull is also an epilogue. It's like epilogue 1, epilogue 2,
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe that's just semantics, like in our own head, but that's truly the way I view it, because I think that original trilogy is doing something very specific, and it represents all three of these people, Harrison Ford, Steven Spielberg, and George Lucas, at a specific time of their lives, because those movies were all within that roughly the same time period.
Right.
And so this, to me, it is like, okay, well, this is one last chance to hang out with this character. And there's a poignancy to it. I think Harrison Ford absolutely brings it. And by the way, I think that, and this is something you said, you kept asking yourself, like, what would Spielberg do? Or what would Spielberg have done? And there, I'm definitely wonder that, but I'm also like, Spielberg is not interested in making this type of movie anymore.
Yeah.
At least for me, the Ready Player One, which he did, I really strongly disliked that movie.
Yeah, and rewatching Crystal Skull, even though I was a little softer on it this time, you can sense that Spielberg is not invested. Like, I mean, it's still better than most action movies of the last 20 years because that's just who he is. But like, you can sense the obligation a little bit. And I think I would rather him not make this movie out of obligation, like, go ahead, like, go make Fablemans and tell the stories that mean more to you now. But I do love that Ford cared, it's like we said, it's pretty obvious he really cared about this. And so, and I thought Mangold, yes, like I missed Spielberg's sort of story sense a little bit, I think, which probably would have brought this down to 2 hours and made the set pieces just a little more. I mean, even just like, it's funny, I was thinking about it. I wish I had referenced it earlier, but with the car chase, again, really impressive car chase. But when you think of the boat chase from Last Crusade, and it's like, yeah, I've seen boat chases, they're fun. But it's like, yeah, but what if it had to go between two boats, and then like one, the one doesn't make it and flies out, or like, and then as he's interrogating the guy, half the boat's being chopped up by a propeller and it's inching them closer and closer to the propeller, and Indy isn't scared. He just wants answers. Like, I feel like that kind of thing I missed. But looking at this as this is a different story, and this is by the people who really wanted to tell it. I feel like it's the epilogue, and I feel like we got the story that the people who wanted to tell it wanted to tell, and I enjoyed that story.
And if I can just add to what you said, I think it's appropriate that James Mangold, who you have to imagine was, he's probably a teenager when Raiders came out, and he was like, holy shit. He got to sort of wrap up that journey of being able to bring to bear everything, you know what I mean, as a filmmaker, create a Raiders-esque experience as the Raiders generation. Like, I think it's so appropriate that Spielberg handed it off. Okay,
right.
This is you bring this home now.
Mm-hmm.
Take what I taught you. Like
yeah. And there is a lot of aplomb, by the way, I think, to the directing. I mean, like, like I say that about the set pieces because I feel like if I have to say something that there was a little itch for me, that has to be said from me. But like, I do think that it was captured really well and not as just sort of shot and chop like a lot of people do. And I appreciated a lot of the intentionality to the filmmaking. And I felt like it's a perfect blend of the voice of the previous films with his own sensibility. So
I think so. And I think I think that Mangold, whose movies I've generally liked, I mean, he made an effort to be more Spielberg-esque,
I'm sure, yeah.
Right. And I think that is plain to see. Well, I mean, do we want to talk spoilers? Do we want to get into it?
Oh yeah. Let's get into characters and story. Let's do it. But it is. Yeah, I think we're about to say the same thing.
It is an unreserved thumbs up from both of us in terms of we both enjoyed this movie.
Yep, definitely. I had a blast. I clapped, I laughed, I smiled. And after seeing it the first time, when I was seeing The Flash again, and I saw a trailer for this, I was like, I can't wait to watch it again. So.
Well, with that, let's reconvene on the other side of the spoiler wall.
Spoilers.
So, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, how about the entirely normal reaction her character has gotten?
I think anyone could have seen that coming. You know what I mean? Like that is just sort of the natural response now, right? Where you put like a female sidekick next to like a beloved hero, and people are just gonna ready their pencils to say the thing they were gonna say no matter what. But I quite liked her, honestly. And I will say the thing that I do sort of cringe at sometimes, though, is when you have a character that you love and they feel it, and regardless of gender, like they feel like they have to pair them with someone new. And then to show that this person can hang, there's like oftentimes that person will have to be smarter or best them or make the other person look like a fool and pick them up. And I was really glad they didn't go that route in this movie because, you have, Indy's older and he's, for some of our friends even, it was not the Indy they wanted to see. But I love that they still made him super capable and smart and able, and she was smart and able too. And she also feels a little bit like younger him, right? Where there's a little of that fortune and glory sense. And she sort of grows through the movie. I will say this was like my other little itch that if I could have it polished up a bit, I wish her turn had felt a little bit more like I had tracked it a little bit more throughout the movie. Because she is so about the money through the whole thing. And then when it gets to the end and she really, really cares about him enough to like stop him from doing what he wants and clock him because she knows what's best for him. Like she gets really emotional. And I was like, oh man, I wish there had been some moment where they had like really bonded in the middle or something. So I could feel this turn a little bit more than I did.
Yeah.
But all that said, I thought she was a lot of fun.
I saw somebody, really dismissively talking about the character as, oh, she's just Rey perfect, meaning Rey from the Star Wars movies.
Interesting.
And first of all, I'm like, I would disagree with that characterization of Rey anyway. But let's stipulate for the sake of argument that okay, let's say that Rey is quote unquote perfect. I think this film shows the exact opposite of Helena. That she's constantly ahead of her skis. She's constantly getting in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
She's capable and smart, but she's like Marion from Raiders, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And she's
Like,
got people after her, you know, that screw things up. Yeah.
I mean, it's so like, I'm just like, you know, there's this sense of like, oh, here's another great male hero that's being supplanted by an over-capable female or whatever. And I'm like, let's talk about how freaking weird it is that you get hung up on this stuff. I'm like, that's demonstrably untrue in the film repeatedly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And in that vein, I mean, I think to me, what I liked is that it acknowledges Indy's age by virtue of him. You know, he's in good shape for a guy who's, you know, 71, but they don't overdo it with the stunts where you're like, well, he would like, no, don't do that. That's, you know, you're gonna get hurt. Don't do that.
I thought it was a really good balance, personally.
I thought so.
Yeah,
you know,
including him in the action, but yeah.
Yeah, like in the early in the film when he's in his college, you know, and he kind of tips over these shelves.
Yes.
And like that's something that's believable for somebody of his age to do, but it's also, I don't know about you, but I'm like, oh my God, he's gonna get hurt. You know?
I know. Yeah.
Right. And maybe that's the problem, right? Because Indiana Jones, per the language of those earlier films, is invincible.
Mm-hmm.
He's like those old timey serial heroes. Nothing actually happens to him, right?
Right.
But again, that's the bargain you make. Once you decouple him from that era and you say, well, now we're going to catch up to him at this age, then you have to say goodbye to those preconceptions.
Yeah. You're helping me realize too, I mean, if you really look at, then you go to Temple of Doom, then you go to Last Crusade, it is almost like Adventure of the Week, you know, then almost like a Bond girl, like who's the girl in this movie, and he's like, he gets shot and he's kind of invincible. And this one asks you to come down to earth a little bit more in terms of emotions and just like mortality, you know?
Yeah.
So I can appreciate, actually, you know, some people just, you know, not feeling as comfortable with that. But as we've said, I appreciate that that's the story they wanted to tell. And I thought that came across in the stunts. Yeah, like
I fully agree with that. And this is something you and I talked about when we first watched it, how near the end, there's a point where Indy gets shot and the villains kind of take him off on their airplane. And Helena, you know, races after the plane on a motorcycle to try to get on the, and we're like, you know, this is what I was like, I'm kind of glad that was the case as opposed to the reverse, because I would have found the reverse less believable of Indy like trying to on the motorcycle, you know,
for sure.
Now that being said, I think the end of the film is very interesting because there was a lot of online chatter, which I actually was not aware of until after we saw it, where some of these idiots, there's this clown on YouTube, his name is Doomcock.
Believe it or not, I'm familiar with him.
I don't know how you could possibly not believe somebody with the handle Doomcock.
Right.
But he was like, oh, what happens at the end of the movie is that Indiana Jones, all of his adventures are erased from history. And now the character of Helena, you know, takes his place. And so retroactively, you know, she's the one who's had all the adventures in order to preserve the timeline, something like that.
Which I don't even understand.
Now, I read all this.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means. Right? Yeah.
Now, I read all that after having watched the movie. So having watched the movie, I was just like, well, that, you know, the way it ends, and we'll talk about that, seems appropriate, you know? And I'm like, after reading this, it's like, oh no, well, they reshot it to.
Yeah, it's an easy way out of that. Yeah.
Easy. Oh yeah. But I'm just like, why? Who in this process? Do you think Harrison Ford would be okay with that?
No way. No way.
Right? Do you think executive producer Steven Spielberg would be okay with that? Do you, you know what I mean? Go down the list. Frank Marshall, who still produces this thing, would he be? No one. Kathleen Kennedy would not be okay with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
So common sense, right? So how fragile and stupid are these people that they actually give this even a modicum of oh, this guy must know what he's talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I bet it got a lot of clicks.
I mean, it drives me crazy, right? But to me, I'm like, the way the whole story wraps up. And by the way, we should mention Mads Mikkelsen as the villain. Who, one thing I will say, I didn't get as much from the villain as I would have liked.
No, I mean, what we get from him is Mads Mikkelsen. You know what I mean? So like he brings whatever we remember about that character for sure.
Now, that being said, probably one of my favorite exchanges in any Indiana Jones movie is when they're in the Hotel Atlantique and Jürgen Voller, right? The Mads Mikkelsen character, he says to Indy, "You should have stayed in New York." And Indy says, "You should have stayed out of Poland."
Yes.
Totally. I love that so much.
Yeah.
Just the absolute spitting contempt he has for Nazis. How can he not love that?
Yeah.
Right. The whole, but the whole, I was going to say arc, the character arc, not the arc, that Indy has as it ties in with the MacGuffin of the movie. I totally tracked with that. And then, we end up in this time travel situation and people are like, oh, time travel, which I feel like we had this discussion when Crystal Skull came out, where I'm like, look, that movie has problems, but I don't think aliens existing in the Indiana Jones universe is suddenly like breaking the seal here,
Sure.
So if we say all that other stuff, immortal knights, how are time portals suddenly out of bounds?
Well, and I think they did a good job also of making it fit within the supernatural threshold of these films. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't like Bill and Ted where he's hopping all over the place and then like, let's go, King Arthur. Like that might have felt like a lot. But first time
he brings Archimedes back to New York, he's like, he loves Utica or whatever.
Dude, I think my brother said that very same thing. Yeah. But it was like when it first happened and they went through the fissure and you saw those boats. I think I looked at you at the first screening. I just started clapping. I was like, yes. Like, I love this. But it's like it didn't become like half the film. Like you said, like I had read some rumors, that, he was going to revisit some of his older adventures and whatnot. And that just would have felt like too much for me. But this was like a really cool, interesting opportunity for this character to get to, what he's obsessed about and to actually get to visit, when that harpoon goes through the airplane and he touches it, like, oh my gosh, like I'm touching history, and it that's the movie. That's the theme of the film, like just feeling out of time in his current time, but then having to reckon like, well, maybe there's still a place for me in my time. And I just thought that was the perfect amount of time spent there and amount of lunacy, does that make sense? Like,
no, it absolutely
was the perfect threshold for me with that in these films.
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love. Only at David's Bridal.
I think a couple thoughts. The movie starts with Indy in kind of a bad place because we find out later that his son has been killed in Vietnam.
Yes.
Which, I mean, James Mangold is like, oh, that had nothing to do with Shia LaBeouf just being a freaking nightmare in the press, about the movie specifically. I think maybe it had a little thing to do with it.
I think it has a little bit, yeah.
But he said I think he made a good point where he's like, he wasn't going to be in the movie. So then it's either he's like just like off somewhere and we just don't refer to him, or we make him relevant in the story. And so I'm kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, that's a sad thing, but I think it works to put Indy at a low place.
For sure.
And by the way, there's that great moment. I texted you about this. I spent after having seen it the second time, just really focusing on Ford's monologue where Helena's like, what would you do if you could travel through time? Like, where would you want to go? And he's just like, I would tell my son not to enlist in Vietnam. And just the heartbreak in his voice, on his face. I mean, truly, like, he made me care more about Mutt in that dialogue than anything in that previous movie. I don't know about you,
No, it played so differently the second time for me, because the first time I was like, oh, like in my head a little bit like, oh, that's what they did. Like I said, my mind was very active the first time, and this time I got a lump in my throat, like, because he sells it, and her face too. I have to give her credit. Her smile fading as he says this stuff was just so potent.
It really was, and to me. And maybe this is the problem, because I knew going in, I don't know how I knew, but I knew that Karen Allen was in this movie.
Okay. She's on the poster, I believe. I think her name's on the poster.
She is.
She wasn't on an early one, but I think she's on the current one.
Because it's meant to be like a surprise appearance, because she was like, she's gave an interview. She's like, I wasn't supposed to talk about it, But I knew going in. So I was like, well, she has to show up somewhere, I don't think, I think that's the resolution of this story, but even without knowing that, even without knowing she's going to be in it, I'm like, that's what makes sense. It doesn't make thematic sense to have Indy actually stay in the past.
This is the big conversation, right? Like, I've seen people really split on this. What would be the happier ending, having him stay in the past and then having some sort of version where in the future someone's on an archaeological dig and finds a fedora, or something like that. And a lot of people seem like pretty on board with that idea.
And that all sounds awful. I'm sorry, it does. It sounds terrible, because that's totally flies in the face of what this movie is about, right? Which is, it's about Indy coming to terms with where he is in life, right? So in other words, he starts at a place where he feels like he's been sort of left behind by time. And by the way, I should mention this. I do think Lucasfilm, maybe they didn't think about it, but they basically gave Indy, or they have Indy at the exact same place Han Solo is at in Force Awakens.
Yes, right. Like, separated from his love.
Because his son is gone.
Yeah, kind of a shell. Yes, yeah, kind of a shell of his former self.
So that I will admit, maybe
it's a trope. It's a trope.
Now, that being said, I would offer that Indiana Jones does more with that than Force Awakens does.
I think so too, because I never loved the Solo and Leia not being together thing, and I get it for dramatic purposes, but I never loved it. I still don't really. It doesn't make me feel good, but like you say, this movie sells that a little better for me.
Like, if I can make the Rocky parallel again, Rocky Balboa starts with him. He's lost Adrian. He's lost his purpose. He doesn't know what to do, and it's about him getting his purpose back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, the point of the ending when Indy winds up back in the past, it's not, if he doesn't get to stay there, then he doesn't have his purpose. It's he got to experience it, however briefly. He got to see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, to me, Helena saying, look, you got to come back. That's no different than Henry Jones saying, Junior, Indiana, let it go.
I thought the same thing. That same sort of the spirit of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
Because he's always tempted. When you think about it in Raiders, right? What Belloc's like, this is history. And that's what forces him to put the rocket launcher down, even though the smart thing would have been to just shoot the rocket launcher. Right.
Right.
But no, he's tempted by it, right? So of course it totally works.
Yeah, and I have to give credit because I just thought this was so well put. But I was listening to the film cast, and Jeff Kanata, one of the co-hosts on there, he was like he loved He said it was having your cake and eating it too in the best possible way, because we get that idea in our head. Like, wow, that is kind of a fascinating idea. Like, what if he did do that? So you almost get the delight from even that notion.
Yeah.
But it stays responsible to the theme of the film, which is, yes, you could do that, but that is completely, negating everything that's waiting for you.
That's right.
In your time that maybe you have lost sight of, but like those things are still there for you if you choose to return to them. She even says, like, are you back? Like, are you really back?
Right. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why I'm completely fine with this ending. I feel it's certainly with the setup. I mean, if you're going to set up Marion at all, it'd be crazy for him to leave. So,
right. Well, and I think that, the idea that the past is there for you to appreciate, but you can't live in it.
Yes.
Now, that being said, I'm currently sitting in my comic book cave where when I'm not talking to you, I have like YouTube videos of commercials from the 1980s playing on a loop.
Sure.
What I'm saying is, me and Indiana Jones, we're on exactly the same page. Just leave us back there.
Well, you know what I mean. In actually seriously thinking about what you just said, I mean, yeah. Like when I think of Indiana Jones, honestly, it reminds me of being 10. This is one of the few movies, even like the new Star Wars stuff. I enjoy it, but it doesn't always make me feel like I'm 10. Like watching Boba Fett or any of that stuff. But like Indiana Jones, without fail, always makes me feel like I'm 10 again.
Yeah.
And I love that feeling, but I don't need to be 10 again. Man, you know what I mean? True. Like I can enjoy those things, but I can also be really thankful for today, which I guess is what I think this movie is saying.
I mean, you just nailed it, right? So the idea that Helena would, that was like, she took away his choice in the matter. And I'm like, what are you, nuts? Like, what? This is ridiculous,
Yeah.
Because this is the thing, right? And Mangold said this, like, there's no way we were going to leave him in the past. That's not a happy ending for the character.
Yeah.
It's the choice he thinks he wants,
It's
he thinks he wants that choice because he's like, I'm at my lowest ebb. There's nothing for me. But the whole point is, of course, you have friends there. You lost your son, but you can get through it together, right? You can get past your grief together, which is so beautifully articulated in the scene with Marion.
And see why I keep saying, yeah, I'm like processing, because I'm like, I can appreciate that thinking. I can appreciate you want him to make that choice. But both times I watched it, I did not think that. I thought she was doing something for him. Yes. And it didn't play that way for me. But what I think could help it for other people and make it even stronger for me, I do stand by, I wish I had tracked her arc a little bit better. I wish like there had been some sort of moment where maybe she is just this cheeky person who is almost taking advantage of this family friend for her gain. But then and maybe she's even become this little disillusioned because of, her father going a little crazy over this thing. But maybe there's some moment in the end or in the middle where like Indy really shows up for her and she changes a little bit because of him. So then at the end, she could carry that and we would believe that she has the understanding of him to be like, well, you knew what was best for me, and now I know what's best for you. And I think you can apply that because I did.
Yeah,
like that was the feeling. I believed her that she knew what was best for him in that moment. But I did as well as she played that. I thought she played it so well. Her emotional, like, you don't want to stay here and die. This isn't a noble thing. And like, I wish I had felt more between them in that moment than I did.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
But yes, I was completely fine with the punch, honestly.
Well, and for anyone who says, "Oh, how could she punch out Indiana Jones?" You say, "Well, Indiana Jones is 70 plus years old, and he was shot."
Yes, yeah. Well, he was dying. I mean, that's the thing. He wasn't going to live back there. Like he was going to die there.
He was like, "Leave me here to die," and she's like, "No, you have more to live for." I don't think that's a particularly hard thing. I'm sorry, Brian. Some of these responses are ridiculous to me. I'm like, you're not. It's the text of the film. It's right there.
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't going to live out a happy life among the ancient Romans.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Here's one thought about the Syracuse sequence. Actually, two thoughts. Number one, I wouldn't say I did not like. It bugs me that Indy happens to give a lecture about the siege of Syracuse, and then he ends up at the siege of Syracuse. You know what I mean?
Sure, very specific.
And I was thinking, I was like, well, there was a way to get around that. Like, why don't you have, like, because we know Helena is in that audience. Why don't you just have her randomly be like, what about the Antikythera? And then, like, because she's searching for it. And she's feeling him out, what he knows about it. And then he launches into a thing about the siege of Syracuse.
Yeah, it could have been, he's talking about mathematicians or something.
Yes.
Like, well, what about, Archimedes and and him like, yeah, exactly.
Exactly, right?
Sort of pivot a little bit,
Because that to quote Brian Hall, that bumped me a little bit.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, that's weirdly specific.
Sure.
The other thought I had was, I wonder if, I didn't mind the Syracuse sequence, but I wonder if it might have played better if they were a little bit, if we got it more through our characters' points of view, as opposed to like, here we are in Archimedes' study, and now we follow him out. Oh, that's definitely Archimedes. Like, maybe a little, like, have the moment of realization come at the same time for Indy as it does for us. Like, oh, that's Archimedes. Like that.
This man approaching. I mean? Yeah, sure.
And so maybe cut out some of the. It's just about which point of view we're following.
You could have still done that too, because there's that whole looming threat of that soldier, right? Like seeing the plane going over to Indy, and then when you think he's going to kill him, whap. And then it's, the guy with the bow and arrow, and then he falls over, revealing,
yes.
the old man in the robe, and him being like, "Oh my gosh," like that's Archimedes.
The actual the dial, I think, is really interesting, because my sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's a closed loop. Like, there was no actually going to. It wasn't about continental drift. It was Archimedes created this thing, and it was about getting reinforcements during this siege.
That was my question. Like, what made Mickelson think that he could like select the specific date? I know there was numbers on a piece of paper, but I kind of missed that.
I'm hoping that becomes a bit clearer to me upon a repeat viewing.
Yeah.
But
yes, that was my impression too.
Because it's like a predestination paradox, because he has to see the dial, and then he sees, okay, it worked, now I have to finish it. It's just a constant. It was always meant to happen, that they were always meant to end up back there.
Right, because even in our quote unquote present, as we're going along with the movie, I mean, Archimedes has the wristwatch already.
That's right.
The corpse of him has the wristwatch on,
right.
Which, by the way, I was like, cool.
That's right. Yeah. I love that the frieze with the propellers on it. So I was like,
yeah, the Phoenix with the propellers. Yep,
doing something interesting,
Yeah, that was cool.
I should mention the kid,
Teddy.
That's right. Who short round 2.0, obviously.
Yeah.
I didn't hate him, but if I'm honest, he didn't do much for me other than be like a kid who's in the way.
Yeah, sadly, I think he was a charming little actor.
Yeah,
but I don't. Yeah, it didn't feel like his character added a whole lot.
Well, it felt like they needed somebody to be on. They needed another plane, basically.
Yeah, to get them back home.
And I love how the pilot is like asleep.
Yeah.
It's like, I guess it's unbelievable to have this kid flying the plane. So let's just have this guy sleeping. Like, you can imagine the breakout session in the writer's room where they're trying to figure that out. Like, okay.
100%. And in our group afterwards, we were talking about whether or not, we wanted Indy to stay in the past. And then I think my brother said, what if they forgot the pilot? And so then when you like look at these old texts, it's like all these people and Roman soldiers and whatnot. And then this guy, like a pilot, shrugging like he got stuck. So you still get that moment of someone being in the past, like, uh-oh.
Yeah. Whoops.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Now the opening, the prologue in 1944. First of all, it's the one and only time we get to see Indiana Jones actually in World War II.
Yeah, right.
Which I think is pretty cool. But I also I like Toby Jones's character.
Yeah, they have a natural, like, I believe they have a history kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and I was thinking about, like, imagine if we had something in that vein for the Harold Oxley character in Crystal Skull. How much better that would have been to make us care about that character, right?
Right. Yeah, sure.
Just something. I mean, not in that vein, and not, you know, as elaborate as that, and which they obviously weren't capable of that 15 years ago. But we talked about the de-aging. I think once I kind of, you know, stamped out my brain being like, that's not real, you know, I was mostly okay with it. But I was thinking about the other flashback that they do later in the movie during Indy's Dr. Richard Kimball phase.
100%. Yeah, he's got that like tan jacket and everything.
That's right. And I was, because that's set in 1952.
Uh-huh.
So that would be about how old Harrison Ford was when he made The Fugitive.
Right.
I was like, I kind of love that. But I was like, that de-aging worked slightly better for me. I don't know if you had that sense.
Yeah, even in terms of expressions, I noticed they were a little more pronounced. Yeah,
which is interesting because I mean, that's set not that much longer, so I don't know what the difference was. You know?
Yeah, I don't either. I don't know how that works, but
as far as the end, and we talked about this when we watched it, but I mean, I can't think of a better way to tie a bow around Indy and Marion's story than where doesn't it hurt? Right here. This is that. It's so perfect.
Yeah, it's a very sweet callback.
I don't know. I was like, of course I want Indy and Marion back together, and I want them to. That's the happy ending, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and certainly after Crystal Skull, you know, I mean, like that's the movie that really did bring them back together. They get married. That felt like their happy ending, and it would be really sad if that were to fall apart at this stage of their life.
Yeah. You know, so I look at like Indy's state at the start of the movie, and I'm like, well, that's kind of the point. He goes on this journey, you know, through the course of this one last grand adventure where he finds himself. I don't know. I found it very touching.
Yeah, well put. Yes.
I also love. I wanted to mention that we did get to see Sala and him too. I think it felt to me like the right amount. I don't know that we needed him to go on the adventure with him.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, he helped him with some information, and it was nice to know that they're still friends in New York.
They're still friends, and yeah, hey, Indy, I got your bag right here, you know? Here's your stuff, you know? I think all of that, I tracked with all of that. I don't know, you know, I think at this point, I'm sort of befuddled by the reactions to the box office reactions to both this and The Flash, but also some of the real nasty, like, oh, I hated it so much, or I'm just like, I genuinely don't get it, you know?
Yeah, it's so interesting too, because like I said, I mean, I'm in that group that's a little more tailored to like it, but I'm seeing more positive than I expected.
Yeah,
I just expected it to be sort of split down the middle, and I guess it just sort of depends, you know, where you're traversing, but as you step back and look at it all, it does sound like it's split. But I was happy to see as many positive reactions as I have. And I think that's the thing. I mean, we keep talking about the themes and sort of the weightier stuff of it, but like, it's a lot of fun. I mean, even with the stuff I said about the action, where maybe the conceit of the set pieces, you know, I could imagine him going this way or that way, but like the execution of what's there is just so cool and fun, and like the, you know, just I like the little touches too that feel sort of indie-esque. Like, for example, when he's on top of the train and the guy's operating that turret, you know, this like bomb goes off, so then the turret is like spinning on its own, unmanned, and it's like taking everyone out, you know, through the train. I was just like, yeah, that just feels unique and indie-ish,
Yeah.
like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So I enjoyed those little touches throughout the action.
In that vein, Brian, another thing I liked was when they're in Archimedes' tomb before they get to the tomb, and he has to game out the water displacement.
Yeah,
like that's indie. That's you know what I mean. How is he getting upstaged in this movie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's the one who figured that out.
Yeah.
I would have liked a bit more of Antonio Banderas.
Yeah, definitely underused.
I think here's the problem. The problem is it's Antonio Banderas, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So like if it's just, you know what I mean? Because there's plenty of dead friends that Indy racks up in these movies. So it's just some guy you'd be like, oh, and that sucks. But I think you sort of expect a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I did. Yeah.
Well, I think you're going to say the same thing.
Probably.
We do get like the moment when after they escape and Helena's like, did you see how we got away or something like that? And Indy's like, my friend just died, like,
yep.
Dial it back,
I like that because that's always been a trait of his. Like he's hard, you know what I mean? Like he if he's in a hurry, you best keep up. But when people get hurt, or it makes me think of his friend who dies, posing as the server in the beginning of Temple of Doom.
Yep.
And he mourns him. Like I love that humanity, and I feel like that stays throughout. We see that here. Because I was feeling that actually when they were zipping away. I was like, dude, like his friend was just shot in cold blood in front of him. Like that. Yep. I was thinking that before they got to that moment, and then I appreciated that they stopped for it.
Well, and I think the fact that you live this long life and you do lose so many of your friends. I mean, what does that do to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, for me in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, that's one of the best moments is just that when he's looking at the pictures of Dad and Marcus. And he's just like, and you just see it on his face. He says rough couple of years, but Spielberg kind of lingers on Harrison Ford's face as he's taking that in. And I'm like, I remember thinking at the time, I'm like, I wanted more of that. I wanted the vulnerability and sort of the acknowledgement of the passage of time. So I think the fact that we get that here, that's why it resonated. But also this idea that, life doesn't stop when you're this age. You find a different gear to be in.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Well put.
I think the final shot where we see, I mean, come on, it's all right there. It's subtext that's just text, right? His hat has been hung out to dry, but not yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is Charles Landy said this, I think, on my Facebook. Like, I think it's also just as much Harrison Ford being like, no one else will wear this hat.
Yeah, sure. Which I love. I love as the final image. Like the adventure continues. What are they? I don't know. But like, yeah, he hasn't hung up his hat yet.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to mention the John Williams score, another banger of a score.
It's like you're reading my mind. I was like, before we go, we got to mention,
but and I paid attention both times. I did not pick up a motif for the dial.
Yeah, a little surprising, huh? Because that's, I mean, even the Crystal Skull, I could hum it right now,
That's right.
But and a lot of reuse also, yes. From previous films. But it's one of those things where, not as this was something I think I spoke about. Oh, shoot, I don't remember if it was Roger Rabbit or on the last episode, but just saying, with Williams, I love that in previous movies. Even the action sequences have their own themes. The asteroid field in Empire Strikes Back has its own,
Well, no, we talked about, if you remember, we were driving into the city to watch this and we were having this discussion. And
was this in real life? Was this on the show?
And I said, or like the tank music in Last Crusade. And then the movie starts and very quickly into the prologue, it's Williams using the tank music from Last Crusade.
Yes.
And I was like, well, I'll be damned.
Yep. And so it's like, I would have loved like new car chase theme or this sort of theme or whatever. But like at the end of the day, I'm just glad that this movie ended with his voice. We got the new music. We got some return to some things from the previous films, which maybe is appropriate, and I feel like it sounded the way it was supposed to sound. And that just delights me to no end.
I could not agree more. Have we covered all the points you wanted to mention?
I think so. Yeah. You?
I'm happy that the movie turned out the way it did, and I think for me, we've got a really great 5 movie cycle. I know I'm going to be revisiting all 5 of these often, and that's just a nice thing to be able to say.
Yep. I know, when you're flipping through channels and then on like Paramount Network or something, one of the indie films is playing. Like, I look forward to it, being in the middle of this one and going, ooh, and then stopping and watching it. So
there you go.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to leave this discussion. But of course, if you all listening have your thoughts and maybe you disagree, in which case, keep that shit to yourself. No, I'm just kidding. No, if you vehemently disagree and you want to make the case, you can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com, or you can hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. Also, as I ask every episode, if you like what we're doing, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, leave a star rating, because every little bit helps, and we very much appreciate that. If you're looking for me online, you can find me on Twitter at Zacky's Corner. That's ZAKIS Corner. You can also read my reviews at the San Francisco Chronicle and other sites as well. If you go to The Wrap, you can read my review of Jack Ryan Season 4. Speaking of Harrison Ford characters, although that,
yeah, right.
One time Harrison. I was thinking about how Harrison Ford is exactly my dad's age, and John Krasinski is exactly my age.
Oh, wow. Huh.
And both playing Jack Ryan. So I was just thinking, I was like, for John Krasinski to play Jack Ryan, what that must have been like, because I know what age he was when the Clear and Present Danger came out or something, what that must have been like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That's cool.
I don't think you've ever watched the Jack Ryan show, have you?
The show? No.
I think you'd like it.
I feel like I would. Yeah, it's one of those things. I just sort of forget about it.
Yeah.
Well,
the final season is out now, so it's done now, so you can dive in.
Yeah.
But you can read my review of that at The Wrap. What do you got going on, Brian?
Young Jedi Adventures. You can check that out at it airs on Disney Junior, and all the episodes that are currently available, the first batch, are available on Disney Plus.
There we go. And we will be back soon with our discussion of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. That's coming soon.
Dude, I can't wait.
I'm excited to check that one out. And of course, we got some commentary tracks planned for this month that we hope you will enjoy as well. In the meantime, on behalf of my partner, Brian Hall, my name is Zachy Hassan. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Welcome, friends. It's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast. Enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.
David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love. Only at David's Bridal. David's Bridal, where brides and bridesmaids get fabulously dressed. We let our friends pick out what we wear, show off our dance moves, obsess over every little detail, hold your hand through it all, smile bravely when it's time to let go. Make your dreams come true. The things we do for love. Only at David's Bridal.